Right, we're back for the newest episode of Summoning Insight. Lots going on in the world. Of course, we are sponsored still by The Freeze Pipe, thanks to thefreezepipe.com. Code LFN for 10% off. Now, when it comes to marijuana smoke and in general hip-hop culture, one thing I've learned is you must always respect your OG. So of course Freeze Pipe has the OG Freeze Pipe, the big pipe where instead of just using it as a normal pipe and having to put up with the smoke, you take the freezer food safe glycerin section, put it in the freezer section for an hour, it comes back, cools the smoke by 200 degrees, and then you get to enjoy the cannabis. But there are actually, it's like the Matrix, isn't it? It's like upgrades. There's more stuff now. They've got more stuff. So you know how Biggie said that line? He said, take notes, and he said something like, take notes and take tokes of the marijuana smoke. Well, here's the thing. You don't even have to take smoke now when you want to take notes with the marijuana, because you can just use a pen, can't you? And this pen is vape. So that means no smoke involved whatsoever. And you can see it's quite small. Comes in this cool little package here. Quite literally has a little, snowflake logo on. Just small. Uses a cartridge-based system. It's got a battery inside. It's got the charger, USB-C charger, all that jazz. And as well as that, if I was to say to you at Worlds, after what I saw in the LCS playoffs, I think Cloud9 will be complete trash. And any team that they can't just scale against and have the ADC win, so any team where you have to have it solo laners, for example, I think they'll just get dummied on, even by maybe PCS. That would be considered quite a blunt tip. They also have blunt tips. They have the glycerin blunt tip there. By the way, if you're wondering, the thing with this is you use it for a blunt or a joint, etc., to even cool the smoke of that. But unlike the freeze pipe, which is a whole bong setup, they have all sorts of dabs, bobblers, oil rigs, etc. This one is easier than that. You just pop this actual whole section in the freezer thing for 20 minutes, and then you're good to go with a blunt or a joint. So there you go. 10% off with the code LFN at thefreezepipe.com.
Excellent. Yeah. And as we've said too, they released their new martini bubbler. So if you want a piece of glass, this is a good one. Lots of new products coming down. So thank you very much to the Freeze Pipe. Again, guys, best way to support us, support our sponsors. We
will soon be doing another one of those like cringe compilation ones in association with Freeze Pipe. So
yes, we will. So if you like the first cringe compilation, many of you did. So you've been submitting videos. A good place to do that is on our Discord in the video submissions channel. And we'll be going through that next week and recording that for you guys so you can enjoy. On to League of Legends. There are so many interesting topics that have just dropped in the last few days, Thorin. So I want to get...
We missed last week's episode. So to be fair, I was actually here on that day. So to be fair, we can even at some point rewind the clock and do the whole LCK finals if you want.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. But outside of game stuff, there's some big news that has dropped. So where do you want to start? We have Gabby Durden, who is retiring from League of Legends esports. We have Ibai saying that he has spent $3 million of his own dollars to prop up the company Infinite Reality, which bought Rogue/Koi. It's a very interesting story. What else do we have? We also have an interview with our favorite not journalist, Travis Gafford.
I don't even know if they should be called interviews when he does them like that, mate, because here's the problem. When he does it with players, it's an interview. When he does it with like industry people, they so clearly obviously set the terms of what he can and can't talk about. As far as I'm concerned, he's essentially just helping them make a better PR statement, if you know what I mean. Like it's just an interactive PR statement. It's not really like an actual interview, is it? But yeah. I think we start actually on the Gabby Durden one. We can knock that one out quickly. Because actually, if people don't know, she's basically announced she won't be involved with LCS next year, 2024, which comes on a year in which, I mean, I'll just say it straight up. I've tried thinking about this as esports historian. Dude, I think this might be the most disliked / reviled / hated talent I've seen maybe ever in Western League of Legends. Like, even as much as people might say they bagged on like Frostgorin, that was like a specific vocal minority didn't like Frostgorin, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bullshit reasons, quite frankly. But in this particular case, especially Reddit, I mean, if you just go and read the thread, Monty, where she says she's basically stepping down, there's not even anyone who's just sort of like, oh, I actually thought she was all right. Everyone's just like hating on her, just like, yeah, good, get out. She was bad. But I actually think the first place to start this discussion, in my opinion, like all like essay premises, is you have to examine examine the premise. So one thing I found really weird about this is it is implied to me, Monty, if you look at what she did on LCS and how she's leaving completely, she's not taking like a step back, different role. If you look at this and combine it with what happened with Dash, where he clearly had a vision of what he wanted to do, but then they wanted him to do something else. I get the vibe. I want to get your take on it because you actually know more about the inside baseball of LCS than me. Is it implied if you are going to be in the position of a Dash or a Gabby Durden, you can't just be the desk person. You can't just be the interview person. It seems like they want you to also be the commentator. They want you to sort of be like a jack of all trades. I know it's in general, it's like a Western League thing because obviously in LEC people know analyst and caster is the same thing. It just depends which game you're on. So is it implied, do you think, that like she couldn't just be the desk and the interview person? Because by the way, as I've said many times, I actually think she was good at that role. I actually thought she did a good job after the LCS championship. I think she did a pretty good job setting stuff. She clearly, by the way, the saddest thing about this to me is she obviously does have authentic passion for League of Legends. Like she wasn't just mailing that in. She's not a great actress. Like, I could tell she actually did like the game and cared about it. So what do you think on that? Is there some sort of thing where you have to be all in, do you think, to be in this role?
So I think it's really hard right now. I mean, I've complained about this multiple times as regards to LCS talent because I don't think that the job is particularly difficult when you compare it to working in other regions. So even to this day in the LCK, obviously the casters are there 5 days a week. You know, you do 2 best of 3s when you're casting on LCK, and you do 2 best of 3s when you're on the desk at LCK, and they switch off on those roles. And I think it just means you can have fewer people on the broadcast, right? And I really have never understood why it is, from a casting perspective, that you do 2 or 3 best of 1s a day as a caster within the LCS, which has always been kind of the meta. Because remember, when people were doing this in the LCS, I was doing 2 best of 3s a day, casting them 5 days a week in LCK. So, you know, you don't need this many people, is what I'm saying. And you certainly don't need this many people when you could have the casting team do 2 best of 3s and then use those same people for the desk for the other 2 or 3 best of 1s rather within a day, right? It's not hard to work 5 games 2 or 3 days a week. And you can switch between casting and the desk. So if I was Riot and I was trying to cut costs, Thorin, what I would do is exactly what they've done this year, which is they brought in everybody under the sun.
Tier people, yeah, exactly. Yes,
they bring in everybody under the sun as a test. So here's what you do. This is,
by the way, it goes without saying when Monty says that they're paying them way less, like they're paying the minimum possible rate, basically.
Yeah,
even
they're
even
paying,
if they were a big, like, small name, the whole point is they're so glad to be there. They're all going to take whatever they're offered, basically.
Yeah. They will pay them. They will end up paying less. So it really means that I think this year they were testing things. They were testing bringing in some of the contenders casters, using people like Gabby in order to see, does it affect viewership, right? But the answer is going to be no, by the way. It doesn't affect viewership because if you don't have a competing product, if you have the monopoly and you're not offering people 2 streams with the same casters, which has been an experiment run in the past. I've told this story before, but I was part of the 2 times this experiment was run. One time, the experiment was run with me and Doa casting StarCraft against Tasteless and Artosis. Same games. Obviously, Tasteless and Artosis got all of the viewership. The second time this was run was when Riot introduced SPO TV as a competitor to OGN, and we were both broadcasting all of the games. Some of them were in SPO TV studios. Some of them were in OGN studios. Yeah, this was 2015. This was LCK. Well, before it became LCK, but yes, Champions Korea. And so what happened, guys, is that
even when the LCK, by the way, you're just mixing up your years. LS wasn't there in 2014, mate. Come on, mate. He came out years later. It's like 2016 or something, I think.
It was 2015. So what happened was LS was in the SPO TV studio with Valdez a lot of the time, and then Doa and I, or Papa Smithy, or Achilleos were casting OGN. And even when the games were not in the OGN studio, so when we were just in like a closet at OGN, we still got all of the viewership. So there's clear precedent that if you give people choices among broadcasters, that there are favorites, and you would think that those favorites would be compensated in a way that would be commensurate with that. So but if there's no other choice, right, then some people are going to go to co-streams, obviously, which have been eating up a larger and larger percentage of the LCS viewership as the LCS viewership has declined. And so I think what their data is going to say is that it doesn't matter who the broadcasters are. And so we should be, if we're paying somebody a day rate, they should be doing more games, which is something I agree with, by the way. I think these people work not enough, in my opinion. And if you can't be flexible between casting and being on the desk, I would rather just hire one group of like 5 people for the day, 5 or 6 people for the day, pay them all a day rate, and then switch them out. As we've seen from LCK, the play-by-play casters can act as a host role, and you have a couple of analysts in there in order to kind of fill out the information on the desk and in the broadcast. So to me, to answer your question, like, I'm incredibly cynical because of what I've seen and what I think it means for the LCS broadcast, which is that they are potentially, I think Gabby was probably not offered a renewal based on.
Right.
I mean, I could be wrong on that one. I could be wrong. That's not information, but I think that they're probably going to trim down the broadcast crew for next year and have been using this as a way to do it.
They have the perfect smoke screen, as I say, with the fact she was just, unfortunately, with the vocal minority, incredibly unpopular. So it's just also a really convenient way to, first of all, she gets the out because she gets to say, like, well, obviously, I don't want to keep doing it if I'm going to get like abuse. And then they just get to go, it wasn't working, so we're switching to someone new. So,
I think it's tough. I think it's going to be tough. I think that people are looking, obviously, for cost cutting within esports right now. And one of the ways you can do that is simply trying to find cheaper talent and then squeezing more out of them based on time. So I would anticipate that this is coming down the pipe right now.
The sad thing is, though, what I actually do hate about it is, if you know anything about the casting circle, when these people who've only casted challengers or like CB LOL or something, like they've been out there in the wild doing what they can to get some experience, when they get to announce, Monty, like, I'm doing LCS next week, they think it's their moment of like, I've made it, like, I'm finally here, like, this is going to be my career. And it's like, bro, you aren't. Like Monty's saying, this is a cynical move where, like, even if you're awesome, like, eventually you're going to be too good to keep the job because they're just going to do the same thing in 2 years. If you come along and say, as someone like a Dash did, like, but I'm really good and I'm established and everyone likes me, can I have twice as much money? I'm making up the number there. Can I have twice as much? They're going to go no. And in fact, we're just going to reboot the cycle. We're going to get another person who comes from the smaller region who will do it for less than you're doing now. We'll start with him again. And even worse, like Monty's saying, because you don't have some, like, I told everyone this would happen with Dash. You would all gaslight me. No, I really care about Dash. I care. You didn't. Not only did you not watch his stream, but eventually you forget he exists. You just keep watching LCS. So what happens eventually is you think it's going to have some big monumental impact. It doesn't. Like, we all tune in and watch the same game. It's just we grumble about the new caster. Like, Riot's not actually wrong. Like, it is the best way to save money, unfortunately.
Yes.
Especially if you don't really care about like the raw quality of the product. If it's just about getting something makeshift out there, this is actually a pretty good route to go if you don't want to spend money.
And look, I mean, I saw the writing on the wall with this in League of Legends, because as soon as Riot started absorbing Korean League of Legends and messing with it, it became very clear that I was not going to have any kind of negotiating leverage, because if they ate everything, which they did, it just becomes a monopoly. And that's why no caster can negotiate rates right now. And it's a huge, huge problem for the casters, because they have no power to negotiate better rates for day rates for themselves, because there's only one company to negotiate against, and they're just setting the market, whether that's fair or not. The other thing that they're doing is, obviously, outside of Cadril, basically, they're not giving people co-streaming rights. So there's no way for you to even compete if you wanted to. Right? Like, there's no way for you to build your own audience. And even with Cadril, you'll notice they haven't given him LCS co-streaming rights. Why is it that there are all these co-streamers for LCS and none of them are the actual casters? Why can't Captain Flowers, on a day he's not broadcasting, co-stream the LCS? Because they don't want to give these people these kind of opportunities. They have literally made a decision to lock, especially the LCS casters, into this arrangement with Riot, and there's no out for them. Like, they are in a cage, and they're not giving them co-streaming rights, and they're not giving anybody co-streaming rights to the LCS. It's ridiculous. Like, I think that people like Azael or Captain Flowers should be able to co-stream on the days that they are not broadcasting, because obviously, if fans of the LCS still want to hear their content, why are they not being given that opportunity?
I will just say, it's just right there, dangling in front of me. Gabby Durden did do a music video, Monty, called Ribcage, parentheses, Awakening. I'm just just saying, it's right there. And it was all about the cage opening up and that sort of, just, many ways foreshadowing. Well-written script. Okay.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is just so malicious. The whole caster ecosystem is just so malicious from Riot.
On the specific Gabby Durden thing, formerly known as Latigris, if people remember, I do think one reason why she had to go is, mate, I didn't really notice that much improvement, at least in the areas that people didn't like it. And the problem with that is, this is pure speculation, but I don't think she's someone who didn't put in the effort. Like, here's one reason why I would say that. Do you remember about a year ago where she did like a really out of nowhere post on social media where it was basically like, she said something like, people keep commenting on my weight, but I'm actually one of those people who sort of like eats when I feel like I've like in my emotions or something. Some sort of weird comment like that, like she had for why she felt like she was overweight, or people would point. If you don't know, she actually like went fucking ham after that, like working in the gym, and like I was all jacked and stuff. So like she obviously is someone who's willing to put in the hours. The problem I think in her case was her like starting skill set just wasn't close enough to what people want from a caster. And unfortunately, I've had to tell a lot of people this in Counter-Strike, mate, and no one wants to hear it because it's everyone's dream, is there are so few people can do the job of being a caster. It's such a limited group of people who are going to get that chance that like probably the number one quality you need isn't anything to do with competence. It's being likable. The audience has to genuinely just enjoy listening. So unfortunately, in her particular case, I think even if she'd somehow leveled her skills, or even if there was some way to get it there, like the sort of ship had sailed on the narrative. Like people had sort of already decided they didn't like her. They didn't like anything about the way she was doing it. And everything she said would have been nitpicked anyway. So like, I actually do think, look, it may not in fact be her choice. Who knows? But I think this is actually the right move for everyone, mate. Like, it's why I said to me, it's just sad she couldn't just stay on the broadcast and be the interview person or be the fucking host of the desk. I thought she was pretty good at that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we've talked about her strengths in the past, and also the fact that it has been unfair in the way that Riot has put her in situations and kind of set her up to fail because they didn't actually play to her strengths or allow her to focus on one thing. It felt like she was just being bounced around from task to task and never really given an opportunity to grow in a specific role and to find her audience and to find her appeal because, I straight up, she's not a great caster. And she has other strengths, and if she was allowed to pursue those things fully and solely, I think that the audience would have reacted very differently to her. And to me, that's a disappointment. But at the same time, if you are in that position as talent, you have to be willing to fight for yourself and say, hey, look, I don't like the way that this is going with my job, and I don't feel like I'm the best person to do these things, and you have to be willing to play to your own strengths instead of just doing whatever they want to do, which may cause you to look bad in the end, right? So it's tough. But I do think, at least as it regards to the talent, like I'm just very cynical about what I've seen from Riot this year, and I frankly expect there to be bigger mix-ups in this offseason, especially as they pursue potentially a new commissioner for the league or make some other changes. I've generally been in favor of the way that they've handled the broadcast content so far and the kind of shift in tone, but I think it's very difficult to pull in new viewership and change the product completely if it's the same faces that we've seen for the last 10 years on the broadcast, right? I think it's very hard to do that. It's
the joke, right? Obviously, in about a year and a half, when he feels like it's safe enough and his focus group tells him it's okay, obviously Captain Flowers will use this moment in a brilliant sort of like referential instance in the game, where in the game he'll be like, 1 minute the Drake was there, now it's gone. What was that? The Gabby Durden Drake? See, but only in about a year and a half, it's really safe, and there's just nothing, nothing could go wrong, basically.
Hedging his bets, obviously.
Exactly. Right? Yes.
Too good. Yeah, and I think this goes into a conversation about the entire North American League of Legends scene, which I referred to this interview that Travis did with the new heads of the Americas region.
By the way, one thing I did love about this interview, because essentially you have to understand the actual material, it's like 40 minutes. If there's ever an interview desperately needed and too long didn't watch, it's this interview, because it's just boring as fuck, and it is literally just corporate people just dancing around questions. Right? But the one thing I enjoyed, because obviously I know Travis and I have like a history with him, is I just enjoy that Travis can't help himself, Monty. He's one of those people who can't be anyone other than himself, right? Which is, as we always say, me and Richard, both his crime and his punishment, which is at the beginning of the interview, he even has the audacity to set up who the people are he's interviewing, but then it inserts sort of a veiled bitch that he didn't have who he clearly really wanted to interview, which was like, the like head of esports or whatever or something like that. So, and then the Naz person, the one that was going to be on that episode about the LCS walkout that got memory hold from the day. He clearly wanted those people, but didn't get them. So instead, these people were the only ones from Riot willing to go. But then he also explains that like he's totally happy to be interviewing them too. It's like, who ever did an interview like this for? Who would ever do an interview like, hey, here I am at the LCS. I've got Stixay here. Obviously wanted to talk to Doublelift. He's a much better and more famous player, but he isn't available. But still glad to have you here, Stixay. Anyway, how you doing? Like, you would never start the interview. So what I love is Travis can't help himself, boys. Like even he knows everyone's watching this like, who the fuck are they? Like nobody, even their own family members might not recognize these guys here. Does anyone know who these two people are? I don't know who they are, mate. I've never seen these people ever.
One of them was recently elevated from the Brazilian office to be head of League of Legends for all of the Americas. So this was a recent announcement that they made. So he's in charge of basically LLA, CB, LOL, and LCS together. So the LCS commissioner job, which is out there being hired for right now, I assume this guy would be that person's boss, basically. So they keep adding more layers between the commissioner and upper management, because now there's like John Needham, who's the CEO of Riot Esports, and then Naz, who's the head of League of Legends, and then they have regional heads of League of Legends. It's all getting very confusing. So the LCS commissioner, I think, is going to be like fifth maybe down on the totem pole in terms of the corporate structure, which obviously means you have no power. I mean, I've said many times this job of the LCS commissioner is a poison chalice by its very nature. You have a doomed product in a viewership death spiral. There's not really anything that you could do as commissioner in order to fix that problem. And also the people who are above you have a vested interest in you not being successful, because if you change things, all of the people who made decisions previously about the LCS, former commissioners, for example, who have been promoted within the company, look dumb because they made all of the bad decisions, such as trying to make it like a sports league, bad format decisions, et cetera, et cetera. So they don't actually want you to make
It's the part
changes.
I love. It's where it's not in any way run like an actual business, Monty. It's like, we need some real big changes here. Whoa. People in the past might look silly then, though. Like,
yeah.
As though that would ever even be a consideration in a business. Like, you just do what makes sense now for the business. Like, who cares about the past? What?
Well, this is what happens when nobody ever leaves the company and they just get promoted internally, and they still have control over the product. So it's very telling, by the way, that they said at the end of this video that they are trying to change the commissioner's role. Because I think the commissioner actually just had no power previously. That's what I think happened, and really didn't have very much ownership over the entire league. So I think maybe they're trying to address this, but it is really hilarious how terrible the answers in this interview are. Some of my favorite highlights. I think Travis actually did ask some tougher questions within this interview, to his credit, including one which is basically like, LCS viewership is down significantly. What are you going to do in order to improve it? And this was my favorite answer, Thorin, because it either shows that they are just being willfully disingenuous, or they just don't understand League of Legends or any esport at all. This answer,
which, to be fair, is always the game with Riot. So it's like,
are you stupid or are you a liar? Which is usually the game.
It is a skills scenario. It's like, which one tips more is the real question.
So to paraphrase the answer, you'll love this. He says, Well, we look at the LCK, and the LCK has more viewership outside of Korea than inside of Korea. Okay, so there's more non-Korean viewership. Of course, it's big in China, obviously, big in the West. So I would imagine that is a true statement that even though by the way,
it's a small country, so it's even a good one he's picked.
The Korean viewership is very good, by the way, guys. Remember, Korea is a country of around 50 million people, and sometimes like, you know, 1 million Korean people are watching the Korean broadcast. Okay, so it's like 2% of the country. It's crazy. It's crazy good viewership by percentage of population. And so he says, so more people non-Koreans are watching LCK. We want to get LCS to that place as a global product.
That's it. So here's the thing, Monty. You know what he's just described there? He's just described a literal cargo cult. So what he's saying is this, Monty. Oh, here on this like tropical island that's fairly remote from civilization, we'd like to be like the British Empire. So in lieu of having a shipbuilding facilities, we're going to use coconuts and make ourselves a HMS destroyer. So we're setting work on it right now. And you know, when it's ready, then we'll sail to England and have an empire. Like, what are you talking about? Like what's mad about that, Monty, is he's really done the old meme. That's like that notepad of like step 1, LCK has enormous exogenous viewership. Step 2, we want LCS to be like LCK. Step 3, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 4, all the viewers are watching the LCS now. And then he looks like, and then you go, but no, here's the genius. Travis goes, but what is step 3 though? That's a proprietary secret at this point.
No, here's the thing.
What I did is, does he have any idea? Is there any mechanism how they're going to do it, Monty?
You'll love this. So Travis didn't ask what is step 3, right? Of course.
no follow-up. Okay.
But it was just hilarious because I'm just sitting there and my jaw just hits the floor, and I'm thinking to myself, you don't even understand your own audience.
I mean, the weirdest part of that is, by definition, the people who watch LCK are the most hardcore viewer of competitive League of Legends, whereas actually the people who watch LCS, by definition, are almost the most casual. Like, I agree with him, Monty. He's not even understood, essentially, who these people are watch the game.
Well, it's also, you know, the LCK has had a specific kind of vibe and way of doing things from the OGN days, right? It's had extreme continuity in the most famous player on earth and Faker, who has not only been part of the same team, he's been part of he's been part of the league and the same team for the entirety of the last decade of his career, right? And we've seen that T1 matches obviously draw the most viewership. They've been able to very successfully build a fan base around Faker and around the brand. And so it has become an international draw. People became accustomed to watching Korean League of Legends. And even though LPL has on average had better teams over the last several years, the production value of LCK and kind of the feel of LCK the brand of LCK has really drawn people in and has, you know, had them continue watching even when it's been very good, but perhaps not the best, right? But
I also think they've nailed even the narrative. Like, they didn't do it consciously, Monty, but the narratives for the LCK teams are way stronger than the LCS. LCS once upon a time had those brands, but people know from all the bitching about TSM and CLG the last few years, they don't have it. Like, think about this, Monty. Like, all the same narratives work, even if they're slightly crowbarred. Like, T1 is just always the Yankees of the fucking LCK. It's like they're always going to be like a powerhouse team, but if you don't like them, then you can slightly hate on them like Dom does. There's a whole drift there. They're not always going to win, but they should win. You have like fucking KT's always like, well, they like the Boston Red Sox in this case. They're supposed to be like the perennial rival, but they're never quite as good, and they've won the odd time. But if you're a fan of them, that's the like sort of outsider way to support a top team. Gen G basically is the replacement for like a Rocks Tigers or a Samsung in this point in time.
They're kind of like the Dodgers in baseball, right?
You've got these like really strong, distinct things, even beyond just the players. And what's weird actually about Korean League of Legends, I've always thought this with the Telecom Wars, is it's almost like it is wrestling, because even when the players are totally different, the narratives just somehow line up the same way. It's actually kind of almost uncanny in Korea, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are really great narratives in the LCK because many of these players have been there for years and years and years. You have so many former world champions. The viewership record was broken in this last playoffs again.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. So it was not counting Chinese streams, but yeah,
was this like the upper bracket match of KT and SKT or something? What was it?
I think it was, yeah, because I think the finals was too short. I'll look that up. I'm not sure, but I know they hit new viewership. But it's like nobody's really tired of Genji versus T1 because it just keeps. It's been the fourth final in a row that we've seen of this, and some people complain about it, but at the same time, it's created quite a bit of viewership as these rivals duel each other at the top every time. So, I think that there's a lot of reasons why people watch the LCK, and Riot will never acknowledge this, but part of that is the legacy of OGN. OGN created the way you do production around a final in particular. And this final was spectacular. I thought the production was extremely good on this final. I thought the hype video was really good, but it's the flow of the broadcast is OGN's flow. They haven't deviated from that. They hired a lot of the OGN producers to work on LCK. It's mostly it's a lot of the same people. And so there's a kind of feeling that you get, that I get while looking at it still, where it's a sense of familiarity and really love for the way that things are done over there, because they've successfully built a brand that I have a large, and many other people have a large degree of affinity with. And that just hasn't happened within LCS. LCS's product was always garbage. It was always garbage. It was too much like traditional sports, and they got away with it because they had all of these compelling players and teams, and people were really invested in the players and teams at the beginning. And so the drag that was created on the show by having a product that really wasn't very good wasn't noticeable. But once the popular players and teams kind of fade away and people no longer have those affinities, and you don't have TSM being as popular as good, and you don't have Bjergsen and people carrying the league, or the personalities like, I'm a Cutie Pie and Skara and, all the OG people, then you have to have a strong brand instead, which they've only started to build now. And I do give them credit for trying to shift the tone and the content of the league, which I think has been more successful, but it's probably too late, if we're being honest. Like, how do you pick up new viewers at this point in time? And there's so many problems, Thorin, with what they're saying, because it also doesn't help the teams. So it doesn't help the esports winter conditions, right? You first off, you just can't get a larger audience for LCS. Like, LCS is not going to be in a position where people want to watch it. Like, first off, it's a time zone issue a lot of the time for Europe and Asia being able to watch all of the games. They said that they did want to introduce more language coverage for LCS. But unless they're going to find some major influencers who want to do co-streams, I think that's not really going to help. Because at the end of the day, if you want to watch good Western League of Legends, you're going to watch LEC. Also, LEC's product is still better than LCS's. So there's not even, like, LCS isn't kicking their ass from an entertainment perspective outside of the game. LEC still dominates that, in my opinion. So you get a worse product, worse League of Legends. And if you're a hardcore fan, you can watch LPL or LCK. And how are you going to get a large Asian audience to watch LCS, and large Asian audiences are what power viewership in China and Korea. So how are you going to get Chinese and Korean people to care about this league? What do they care about? They care about nothing. There's no draw. There is no draw. You could add all the influencers in the world. You could add Disguised Toast, Ludwig. People in Korea and China don't even know who these people are. So there isn't a way to accomplish the goal of having exterior viewership. And Thorin, even if you did, so Arnold Herr came on the Monte and Wolf show and said that the Korean orgs,
from Gen G, if people
he's the CEO of Gen G, said the Korean orgs not doing so hot financially right now, right? And this is the case that they have all of this exterior viewership. Now, I don't know about the Chinese stream for LCK, but I can tell you right now that the global stream, the English stream, has 0 sponsors for the English audience. So they can have all of the fucking viewership in the world, and most of it can be coming from outside of Korea. But if that's true, they're not really monetizing the majority of their audience. They're not selling sponsors, as far as I can tell. Like, why don't they have sponsors? Remember that more people watch the English LCK channel than the LCS. So surely they should be able to sell some level of sponsorship against that, right? And it's really confusing that can't happen. Yeah, and
I'll make that point even more emphatically, Monty. If people don't know, like, look, I'm sure for Koreans themselves, because all their connections are within Korea, they do an awesome job selling it in the Korean market. But if people don't know, the prime market to sell advertising in esports is fucking English language in America, UK, and maybe a little bit of Australia. That is like the number one easiest place to sell it. It's the reason why the Cloud9s of this world kill it in the sponsorship game and always have these huge sponsors and a massive deck. So the weirdest thing about that is it just shows that, like, even LCK essentially doesn't sort of care to figure out how to do this other thing that they need to do.
Yeah, and by the way, if you are a team in the LCS, this is terrible news. I don't want to hear, if I'm a team owner in the LCS, that the plan is to get more non-American viewership for the reasons you stated. You want as much US viewership as possible because it's the best to monetize.
You know, the joke is, by the logic of what Riot has done incentives-wise, Monty, if I'm actually Jack from Cloud9, it makes almost no sense to try and do more for my team because you're not, like you say, the viewers you're adding aren't even from my sponsor's region. If anything, I should just get my players and do a watch party for LCK and sell on that fucking stream. I could actually sell my region and make money off that. Like, that would actually be better incentive structure for us, as bad as that sounds.
It's crazy.
So just have Sven basically watch LCK when he's not doing LCS.
Yes. Yeah, you should have your players co-stream. That's actually a good point, and which is insanity, right? But this is why.
But yeah, go on.
This is why. Whatever. This is why
they don't all need to be commented on. Keep going.
This is why we complain about the misaligned incentives of the publishers and the developers and an actual esports product that makes money. Because in their brains, this is where the mask slips, right? In their brains, the only thing they care about is absolute viewership, right? And that doesn't actually help, as far as I can tell, because they have done such a bad job of selling absolute viewership. Like, why can't they sell, for example, if the LCK is just crushing it, why can't they go to Coca-Cola Global or McDonald's Global and get global marketing budget for total coverage across all their leagues and all their regions? They should be able to do that. Or do it for all of their leagues at the same time. It's very strange that they haven't been able to create a global sale yet, right? They have stuff for international tournaments and leagues, like they had State Farm for LCS and Worlds last year, for example, or they have MasterCard for their international events. But it really has, and like some of their regional leagues, but it's very weird that they haven't been able to close a big deal with a major global partner. Which would probably help alleviate some of these issues because you're trying to make a sale against multiple languages and multiple regions at once. Now, those deals are hard to do. I'm not saying that's easy, but given the fact that they've had, I don't know, a decade and are the biggest esport in the world, you would think that would have happened by now. So I don't know, man. I think this is really problematic, and I think it is crazy that they are looking at LCK as a guiding light. Because, again, either they don't understand why the LCK is what it is in terms of viewership, or they're dumb. And that's really because you're never going to turn it into LCK. But also, as I said, turning it into LCK doesn't solve the problems because you haven't solved those problems with LCK.
You've actually nailed this. Like, essentially, Travis could have invalidated the entire interview by just asking one question and demanding an actual answer to it. And the question goes, what possible reason would someone not from the LCS region have to watch the LCS? I guarantee you there's no answer they can give. There's nothing. They would have to unironically say something like they are a fan of TSM. Like, what else is there? Like, because it can't be the players better, the broadcast is more entertaining. Like, the hours are good. There's no, as you say, Monty, there is actually no reason that this hypothetical viewer will tune in. Especially if you actually really do want it to be Koreans and Chinese people, because as I've always said, my angle's the only chance you had for that, which is a long time ago. Some of them did for entertainment reasons care about a double lift or something like that, or maybe when G2 won MSI, they might have cared about G2 or something. But that was like a very brief window, and that was based around certain enormous star figures. Like beyond that, no one was mate. If fans don't know, those players used to lie in season 4, guys. They didn't really watch the LCS. Like, I've done those interviews literally with the dandies and the matters of the world, where when you turn the camera off and then you ask your translator, ask him, did he really watch LCS? They just say no. Or they say, I watched the odd game every now and then, or I saw Double Lift do a highlight or something. Like, no, nobody was watching the Western League of Legends ever. That was always a myth to me. It's why the real reason they went on and on and on in every interview about Bjergsen and Reckless is because they just always got to attend the international events. So that's how they knew them. They weren't watching Reckless play LEC, guys. No one was. Come on.
They literally didn't even know any of the other players.
No, of course not.
Just in my conversations with Korean players, the response was literal who a lot of the time. And the reason why they said Bjergsen was because he was the only player that they knew.
Yes.
That's how it is, guys. They spent zero time watching LCS. Sometimes they watch LEC because obviously G2 was quite good for a while.
Here's what kills me though, bro, is the answer is obvious to me though, which is if I can't change anything else about like what makes the broadcast, the number one thing I would change is the format, mate. It's the immediate thing I'd start doing. Like my question would be, is there a way to make like a circuit or some kind of different approach? Like, do I need a different type of a competition? Do I need to make it just a bunch of short fun tournaments? Does it have to be one lock? I would be looking at that angle personally. I think that's the best way to reinvent it.
Yeah. I think they will change the format. Again, I've said this a lot on this show, but the only reason they didn't change the format this year was because they promised the owners that they wouldn't do it until next year. Even though I think many of the owners would have rather had the LEC format this year, and I think they will be making pretty big adjustments to the format next year. That's everything I've heard says that they will do that.
And also, here's another one for you, Monty. Like, obviously, I get the vibe because of how the Chinese and Korean systems are set up. You aren't ever going to get a Super League like you wanted. But why can't you have a Western Super League is my question.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be awesome. I mean, to me, by the way, I'm not even going to make it just Western Super League. I would make it all the Western shit. Like, I would make the two best CB LOL teams, plus, I don't know, the best team from the LAN arena, plus the the fucking, I don't know, top 40 LEC teams, plus the best 4 LCS, whatever the scenario. And then I would make a circuit and I'd have a bunch of different competitions. I think that immediately would make it more interesting to me.
I think what I've heard from some of the team owners is that they would like a combination, like the LEC and the LCS to merge into one larger league.
Because the level's at least close enough. You can have fun with that. Like the CB LOL team every now and then is going to upset like a top LEC team. That'd be awesome. Think of the trash talking, the rivalry. I think this is the way you bring it back, in my opinion.
Yeah, right, and you could kind of swap teams, like half the LEC teams could come to LCS, like LA, half of the LCS teams could go to Berlin. You play each other there for half a split, and then you kind of like change places. So you spend half the time at home, half the time away. That way you're not, traveling every week with jet lag. There's lots of ways logistically.
Remember, the good thing about European League of Legends is because you've got all those sturdy ERLs, people are going to be able to watch something anywhere. Like if you're a French fan, it doesn't matter if like Vitality goes to LCS. You just watch the LFL still, plus whatever games you watch of Vitality in the LCS. Like I think Europe is even the one that could survive sending these teams, mate.
Oh yeah, I don't think it'd be an issue. I think it'd be good for LEC viewership as well because it would be a hyped new product.
Anything you can do that brings in the Brazilian viewership, that's just an instant win for everyone.
Sure, yeah. And I do think that having all Brazilian rosters in LCS would be extremely good. As I've said many times, like Immortal owns MIBR. Let them use the MIBR, rebrand to MIBR. They own it. Then allow them to just run a Brazilian roster. You will see Immortals be useful in terms of league viewership and hype and competitiveness rise immediately. That is a very quick fix, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think there are many things you could do, but I think it is crazy to say that, well, if we start doing, they mentioned, we wanted the Spanish LCS language, Spanish broadcast has been successful. I have no idea if that's true. They said they wanted to add Portuguese and other languages to LCS. But again, it just kind of misses the point because if you're a Portuguese speaking Brazilian person, you probably just care about CB LOL because again, you're not watching LCS because it has Brazilian people in it and you want to cheer for your countrymen. it's not more competitive. Like, if you want competitive League of Legends, you just go to Asian League of Legends. And if you want to cheer for people from your country, you'll just go to your country's league, whether that's LFL or CB LOL. So I don't understand why adding languages is going to help LCS's viewership get out of this spiral. And even if it did, it doesn't help the monetization problems of the teams. It just helps Riot have more reach for marketing, right? So it's very confusing because it's not like when Riot goes to sponsors, the sponsors say, give us the geolocation breakdown of your viewership. And then they do. And they will see what percentage of that audience is American and spend accordingly, right? What they need to do is pump the American audience. And they did touch on it a little bit by saying that they think that they're trying to reach people who formerly watched the LCS, because obviously there are a lot of those people, because it used to have 400,000 concurrent viewers for regular season matches. They're trying to reach those people and try and bring them back into the fold. But honestly, the problem with League of Legends as an esport is because it changes so drastically every year. If you don't keep playing and you've been out of the game for 3 or 4 years, it's basically an entirely new game, and there's new champions, new items. It's very difficult to understand. And if people have just aged out and they haven't been replaced by younger players or new players to the game, which they haven't because of their failures within the high school circuit in particular, which we've blamed on like Play Versus in the past. Young people in America just aren't playing League of Legends. It's not like it is in Korea where new blood comes into the game all the time. And that's a systemic failure on Riot's part in this region that can't really be undone. So I don't know how you bring in these people who maybe just don't play the game anymore. It's a very weird problem. And I just don't think it's a solvable one. And their ideas about the solution, even to say the things that they said, I think is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous.
The problem, I think, is this. You've got two quite unique issues here. So one is, this isn't even something that was always the case, but as is a general rule being the case, the product is just shit. The actual games in LCS are not good games of League of Legends. Nope. When people do that stupid thing they always did, Monty, where they were like, it's just because you have a bias. No, you cannot gaslight me. I have watched 10 years of this shit. The LCK, it's worse now, guys. The gap has only gotten bigger. The gap now might be LCK might be 15 times better to watch than the LCS. And the LCK isn't even as good as the LPL, by the way, but it's way better. It's so significantly better. And then the second problem you have is, in my opinion, the most unique problem in esports history, which is the main region of the company Riot Games is America, but America, only by their bullshit system, is even the fourth best region, Monty. If you actually had to rank the teams in the entire world of League of Legends 1 to X, the LCS teams would be number 100 on the list. It's actually absurd how bad they are. And then we're asking for real. This is the only comparison I can even give here, Monty, is insane woke shit. And the reason I say insane is stuff where the premise doesn't make sense. So when someone comes to you and goes, how do we get women's tennis to make as much as the men's? It's I can't even process the premise. Holy shit. To even unpack that is blowing my mind, because you've made 10 assumptions in the question that no one's ever been able to establish. What you're asking me there is for real to just create a miracle alternate reality. So in the same scenario, what I would do is, again, this is why, by the way, Riot doesn't do real interviews, because in a real interview, some real motherfucker like me or Richard Lewis rocks up and goes, but how would the region that has the 100th best team in ever be comparable to the best region? And you'd even say, to even give them a lifeline, just to take it away from them again, you'd go, do you know any sports examples of when this is happening? They wouldn't have anything, by the way, guys. They wouldn't have. That's why when we did that Four Horsemen episode, people like Philip Aram loosely would touch on things like European soccer and the English Premier League, but they never had any concrete example, oh, and look, this team here did this, because that's the problem. There's no past precedent of this. Like I said, I can't think of an example like this, Monty. When was there ever an esport where the main region we're all obsessed with making have viewership is one that has all the shit teams in? What? Bro, could you imagine in Counter-Strike if we had to endlessly figure out, but how do we get people to watch Counter-Strike in Southeast Asia? Who gives a shit? Just don't. Just watch European, and you fucking idiot. So basically what you're saying is, instead of why don't we all watch the really good shit, you're going, how do we mind fuck people to only care about the bad shit? not only do I not know, I almost don't want to know. This is like some Lovecraftian shit. Like, I feel like to know what you want me to know would destroy my whole reality. Like, I can't handle this. So I have to like buckle in to do these episodes. Like, right, come on, let's heads together. Let's figure out how to make LCS good again.
Look, I've said it a million times.
LCS better by pressing the X in the right hand corner of the screen.
Exactly.
That's what I do, mate.
Well, that's where everybody is, right? And you're trying to figure out how to not press the X button. And this is why the commissioner job is just so terrible for the LCS. And it's going to be some sucker who takes this position because there's no fixing the problem. And especially because they won't even go back to do, and part of this interview too was equally hilarious because Travis does, I think, grill them a lot about the shift to weekdays and the timing issues that happen within the league. And the questions were, are you thinking about switching back to weekends? No, because VCT is there, of course, now, because they put VCT there. And so
they're still treating us like Monty. It was bad enough when we were supposed to watch a whole day of shit BO1s. You're now supposed to also consume a whole separate esport simultaneously. The worst thing about Riot will always be this, Monty, and you know this, but other people don't get this. They don't just paint themselves into a corner, Monty. They will actively say, here we are, painting ourselves into a corner, and then everyone who knows something will go, whoa, 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 if you keep doing that, you're going to be painted into a corner at some point. You'll have no choice left to do the thing that no one wants. Yes, but now I'm in the corner, though, so what can I do? I guess I'll just have to do that thing no one wants. If people don't know, this is going on right now in Valorant, where they've basically done the same thing. It's like they've set themselves up into trouble, and then they're like, well, now that there's nothing left to do, we'll just make a bad decision. Like, what? Have you noticed how Riot never actually addressed their assumptions, mate? They never unpack their initial assumption. Like, the first assumption there that they are putting forwards, Monty, when they say that, is that it's totally logical that a fan of the LCS also watches VCT Americas in Valorant. I don't see the connection myself. I don't even see the connection if they made the game, mate. It's like, what would they connect? So what? So what? Why would Riot Games be involved? I mean, I watch Valorant as well now. Like, I feel like you're just making extra problems for yourselves, guys. Just figure out the league part. Don't worry about Valorant. In fact, if anything, let Valorant be its own thing. It seems like it's doing well.
Yeah. And by the way, let's talk about how well it's doing compared to LCS. So VCT America's League 2023 did almost 36 million viewed hours this year. Peak viewers of 550,000. Average viewers of over 200,000, 205,000.
By the way, just before people get lost, that's because VCT Americas is what we're talking about with like bringing Brazil in. It's all of the Americas. Yes. And the best team in the world at the time was Loud from Brazil, who actually is in this competition. So it's a very different scenario just before people think this is the same as a one-to-one of LCS. It's very different from LCS in that regard.
But the point is, which of these leagues do you put in the better time slot on weekends, right? I'm just making a point. So the viewership of this for VCT this year, so they did 174 hours of broadcast. Now, LCS Summer did 154, so 20 fewer hours of broadcast time, right? Keep that in mind. So 35 million, almost 36 million hours watched VCT Americas. 12 million LCS, so 1/3 of the total viewership. Average viewers of LCS Summer, 76,000. Average viewers of VCT Americas, 205,000. Peak viewers VCT, 554. Peak viewers LCS, 223. So you pick your metric. It is between 2 and 3 times bigger to do VCT Americas. Now,
by the
these
way,
numbers.
I'll just throw this in there. That's also why the LCS walkout was so fucking stupid, because you guys get paid like 10 times more than the game that's making 3 times more viewership. You idiots. You idiot players. Like, by the way, you do know, I knew this sadly. It was all, listen, because of the esports winter, you were already going to get like downsized anyway. But the second you did that walkout, you guaranteed you would make way less money in your career. The second you did it. Because what you actually did was throw a bucket of water in your owner's face and go, shit, what am I doing actually? This is a fucking waste of everyone's time. And they're all out now, mate. They're all headed for the hills now.
So yeah, I mean, it was clearly a decision, and the right decision. By the way, all these numbers include co-streaming numbers because that gets brought up every time.
Of course. Yes.
When we talk about numbers, I need people to understand this. Co-streaming numbers are always included these days, guys. Always included in viewership. So when we look at these numbers, it makes sense that Riot made the decision. Why would they roll it back? They can't do 2 broadcasts in the same studio on the weekend, right? And they are unwilling to move the LCS outside of Los Angeles to a different studio, or even in a different studio within Los Angeles to do it at the same time. So in the interview, they deflect a bunch of questions about the viewership. Now, we can ask, what happened to the viewership once they moved it? Now, was it because they moved it to weekdays? Was it because of the strike, making it so people didn't know when the league started? Was it that there were 3 days of broadcast? It was a super week every week and a truncated season in terms of time, not in terms of days. They still did the same number of days because they have the same format. They just had to do it in a smaller time period, right? This is all to say that year over year, so from LCS Summer 2022 to LCS Summer 2023, viewership was down 40%. 40% year over year. Now, is that because there's declining interest in the LCS? Is that because of the day switch? We don't know. Even if you compare it from spring to summer, so from spring this year to summer this year, there was a 17% decrease in viewership. So it is going down significantly. And how do you sell sponsors if you say, well, you know, this year we had 40% fewer viewers than last year? That is a fucking massive decline in viewership. Massive. And I don't know if that's the weekday thing, but remember that they said they had all the data that this was going to be a better time slot. So I admit there's a possibility that they are correct, and this could have been even worse if it was still on weekends. I don't think that's true, but I don't know. I can't know that for sure. But you know something that's really funny, and I was thinking about this while having this interview, while listening to this interview, because the whole thing is Riot always says, well, the data says this, and the data says this. You know, the data says we have all these old LCS fans who we think we can like rope back into the fold, and you know, the data says perhaps we can get a bunch of foreign language viewers for the LCS, because look how many viewers exist for LCK who are not Korean speakers, right? So I was reading this book by a guy named Rory Sutherland. And Rory Sutherland is the vice chairman of Ogilvy, which is a massive, one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the world. Okay. And he wrote this book called Alchemy, which is very interesting about basically how marketing works and how a lot of times it is counterintuitive. And people don't, it's been very well proven via studies that people don't really know what they want. They say they want things, but they don't actually want those things. And so you have to be subversive or kind of have this magic, which is why the book is called Alchemy, in order to make gold. And one of the very salient points that he makes in this book is that everyone these days, because we live in a kind of tech science-driven society, everybody wants to look at the data. And the data can be interpreted, obviously, in a variety of different ways. But here's the point that he makes, is that the data, if you follow the data, it never gets you fired, Thorin. Because it's as if you were following some sort of objective truth in reality. And even if you misinterpret it, it is the safe move to make always if you want to hang on to your job. Because doing things against the data, even if they would result in a highly creative product that would then catch fire within the world, right? Because a lot of time to be innovative, there cannot be data around what you are doing to break out. And so what I find so hilarious about Riot is they said, oh, the data says that there's going to be more viewership here. Now, that person who made that decision is not going to be fired for a 40% drop in viewership year over year, because they have the data backing them up, even though we can now look at that and say almost certainly that was a failure, right? And so the crazy thing is that what situations like this need is somebody who is willing to take extreme risks. Because there isn't going to be fixing the LCS's viewership problem by doing what they have been doing or by following the data, because every data-driven decision they have made has led them to dig the hole deeper. And what I just really enjoyed that about this book, because even if a big swing is a failure, that's when you get fired. Like, that is the risk of getting fired from not following the data and trying to make a big swing. Whereas he makes an argument that you should actually reward these people because a lot of times they are trying to do something that is truly innovative, whereas the people who follow the data won't get fired and actually create stagnation among products and companies. And I think that's 100% applicable here. And, you know, a lot at the end of the day, nobody wants to be responsible for perhaps fucking up the LCS even further by trying to make it something really interesting. But I think that's the only way to kind of dig it out of the position it's in right now, because continuing to do the same thing is not going to work. And they have intentionally put it in a worse time slot to accommodate VCT.
Like I said, the main problem you have is it's just a fundamentally bad product. Like, if you have a bad product, Monty, the only marketing left is hoodwinking people. It's tricking them into thinking they want your bad product. If you have a really good product like LCK, like the LPL, it's relatively easy to market that and to set it up and make it succeed. Essentially, you just get out your own way and people are going to come to it. So I don't think there is no solution to this, mate. It's just spinning your wheels. Like, as far as I can tell, all they really do is just keep rearranging chairs on the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's like, this time let's put them on the upper deck, though. Oh, but actually, someone said on the lower deck you get more view of like the ice. Well, go on then, let's go down there. And they just keep doing that. So,
the data says,
my job. Oh, can I get paid still? Good. Awesome.
The data says if we move them over to the starboard side, that the Titanic will sink 3% less slowly. It's like this is what these people are doing. And I don't understand what happens within the Riot offices, because it is so obvious to anyone outside of the Riot bubble. And Riot exists in its own alternate reality because they've created a company culture where people who are divisive internally, they just fire them or get rid of them or memory hole them a lot of the time. And so it's really tricky because the cult of Riot makes calling people out or trying to fix things or saying something is wrong very, very difficult. And so I guess we're just going to continue to march down this crazy path with the LCS.
The real problem is, it's like the old refrain we always say, Chinatown style, Monty, at the end of every problem in League of Legends in North America. It's systemic, bro. Systemic. That's it.
The data said the viewership would increase on weekdays. Because the only thing about that was that it was either going to be, it was either just a cover story for wanting to put VCT, the better performing product, in the better time slots, and they just lied to you. Or they actually believed this in some way, even though I guess technically more people might be available during these time zones. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be using their time to watch LCS, right? So I think it's crazy. I think this interview is crazy. And of course, my favorite thing is Travis asked directly, have they had internal conversations about moving the LCS outside of Los Angeles? He just said categorically no, which is a lie. By the way, that is just a lie, because I know they've happened. And I said on Power Spike when I talked about this, I don't know what their plans are for this, but I do know the conversations have occurred. And by the way, of course,
yeah, I know how they do that lie, Monty. As a journalist, I'll tell you how they justify in their mind that lie. Because even though that was just like, essentially, have you thought about it is the real question.
Yeah.
What they'll do is they'll be like, well, we've never actually had a meeting where we sat down and it said the agenda of this meeting is to move to that.
Yes, exactly.
Because by the way, this is what team org owners do all day long. They'll be like, I was never going to sign that player. Meanwhile, like, I know the two players. It was like, yeah, let's play together the next season. And then it's like, they just never got the contract done or something, But there's so many ways you can like sidestep that if you want to get around it.
And obviously, like, you guys should know that this conversation occurred just intuitively. If your league is declining in revenue and declining in viewership and you're trying to cut costs, of course it comes up that you might move this thing to a place where it'd be cheaper to operate. And maybe you look at that costs on a high level and you say, it's not worth it. Or Riot says, well, we already own this studio. We have these people working on the production. It's too much of a hassle for us to change it. Right. But to say that those conversations haven't occurred is clearly, like, if they have not occurred,
I mean, you're a moron if it hasn't occurred.
You're a moron. I don't know what to say. You're just a fucking idiot.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You should admit it's happened, just so you sound like you actually thought through all the possibilities, right? You sound like an incompetent otherwise.
So I was really shocked to hear that, because obviously, I mean, I'm telling you, those conversations did occur, and they may not have gotten very far with them, but it has been a point that has been brought up internally with Riot. And of course it has been, guys. Of course, like, logically, anybody would have brought up that conversation. anybody would have looked into that at least on a high level. But I just don't understand what's going on. Like it sounded just this interview just sounded completely insane to me. I don't know why they even bother doing these interviews if these are their plans, or they're going to give such incredibly terrible responses to these questions.
By the way, I'll just say this. Even though I said earlier that they don't do interviews with people like me and Richard, that's just something that has existed for like 10 years if people don't know. If it was going to be an interview like this, Monty, I also wouldn't waste my time doing the interview. Like, I wouldn't post something like that on the internet. Like, all they do is... Here's the thing. They don't even have the good, like, fucking decency to just tell you, like, I won't be commenting on that topic. They'll just still waste 10 minutes of your time dancing around, not answering the question. Like, I find those sorts of interviews really obnoxious, mate.
Yeah. It's an obnoxious interview. What can you say? But also, I'm glad they did it because the answers were just hilarious. They were just incredibly terrible.
Here's how you know it's not a good interview. Because unless you did hire some like straight fire commissioner, say you have some like Dana White character or whatever. It's true. Sometimes they get off on the challenge of, it's a tricky interview and they're like trying to like sort of dance with you, etc. But these guys are loving it. Like these guys, while they do this interview, are like on some fucking South Park shit, like huffing their own farts from a tank. Like, can you believe we're just telling them anything and they have to believe it? Anyway, fuck it, I'm going to tell them next. We didn't even talk about moving the studio. Yeah, of course we haven't even discussed where we're going to move it to. Like, this is just garbage, mate. What is this? Just absolute trash. When Travis is 2 steps ahead of you, maybe rethink your whole strategy.
You'll love this. I looked up so there are new laws in California, Thorin, that require you to disclose salary ranges for jobs that are posted. Okay. So they posted the LCS commissioner job.
Come on, hit me with the range.
140 to 240, which is hilariously...
I thought it would be.
I think it's way too low for the kind of person they want, because they say that a JD is preferred. So they want a lawyer. And so why would a lawyer who could make a good lawyer can make way more money than that?
Yeah, but they're going to get an esports lawyer, mate. So that's going to be right on the mark for them. And if anything, they're just going to... The worst thing about these jobs, by the way, is you're just going to get some like fucking grifter who wants it on his resume. He's not really doing it because he cares about this job. There's not going to be someone who like, I really care about being the commissioner. They just want that on the resume, don't they?
The problem is that to get somebody good, it's going to cost a lot more money, because people who understand this space know what a shit job that is. And how
it's a brilliant job. Jackie Felling never appeared on camera ever, never did an interview ever, just surfed Reddit all day. Like, actually sounds like she has the perfect American office job. What are you talking about?
I think it's really tough to find somebody who would take the burden of that job, because anybody who knows esports is going to look at that job and say, holy shit, I might just be a scapegoat.
I know who we should do. I know who we need to get. There's only one person who was both primed with their career for this job, but also would kill it and bring a fresh new level of eyeballs. It's obviously Nicole LaPointe Jameson. This is her career pivot. And then here's the thing. I wanted to bring that whole swagger she brought to EG. Like, whoa, it's the LCS now and it's the queendom. So all you LCK and LPL, you're going to be so salty after. Oh, man, I wanted to bring the whole obnoxious shit she brought to EG, but just bring that to the LCS. I want her to be the face of the LCS. I hope that when I type #LCS on Twitter, it doesn't do the symbol of the LCS. It's just her face. I just want it to be her face right there. And also, the other reason, just as an aside, is I'm quite petty. So I think it would just be really funny that Travis has to keep interviewing his ex-girlfriend over and over again. Like, well, this isn't awkward at all, is it? Well, keep it all in the family, I guess. All right, double lift with there, mate. I'm doing a different interview with a mad conflict of interest now, right? Come on, then. Come on in, love. That's still mental to me. They actually dated her, but whatever. Whatever. I know. It's by the by at this point. It's not. Sadly, it's not even top 10 crazy things in LCS. Is it? So like, who gives a shit at this point in time? By the way, though, yeah, I will say I don't know if you noticed this, Monty, in light of we talked on the past about that thing going on in Valorant where Sentinels had to admit that they're like losing money out the arse. Right. And obviously it turns out Lena is the chief revenue officer. Yep. It's better because did you see in that breakdown where it showed how much she makes? She makes like 200 grand plus something like 2.5% commission on all like the revenue of like deals she does. So the joke is, guys, I hope you understand what that means. She is literally incentivized to do her job really well and for them to not be in this position. but she is not doing a good enough job. Like, that's what I actually love is, you know, back in the day, like, I don't actually know 100% Monty within TSM. What does president do? I'm not entirely sure if that's like, is it just sort of like a titular role and you're mainly there to just be the face? Are you making decisions like a CEO would? I don't know. It's hard to know. But what I love about this generation is the titles are almost some perverse Swiftian joke. Like, of course, the person who's the CEO of EG is the moron who doesn't know anything about being a leader. Of course, the person who's the director of performance is then bragging about the worst performance ever. Of course, someone who was the chief revenue officer has all the revenue get fucked up and the company almost dead and then goes, well, it's not my fault, is it? It's like, it is by definition literally only your fault. Like, if this was some sort of like a fucking, like, you know, court martial, you would 100% be being stripped of all your honors and kicked out of the military now. Like,
yes, where is the revenue? Where is the revenue? To be fair, I mean, the revenue issue is ever present right now in esports.
Edit that scene from The Dark Knight where the Joker's being interrogated by Batman, but then it's just like me, and then Lena's the Joker, and I'm just like, where is the revenue? Where is it? Like,
the deck is very much stacked against you at this point in time, but still, the best people are going to find ways in order to.
It's true. That is what I always say whenever Lena's in an org. Well, now the deck's stacked against you as well. But enough about how incompetent she is at her job. People don't know they call it a deck when you make the marketing thing. This but yeah, you get it. Whatever.
That's funny.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. It's literally stacked against you now, man. Yeah,
and we're seeing this in other ways. I mean, there was just a lot of news that dropped in the last couple of days, and one of the other ones is about the LEC. So. All right, here we go. Here we go. Again, another place where only this show can really talk about this, or Four Horsemen. But according to there's some rumors that have come out, and Infinite Reality. So Infinite Reality is
great
a
name,
company.
by the way. Brilliant name, by the way. Free sports. I love it already. Go
on. And also, you'll love this. Infinite Reality is like a Web3 company. Apparently, of course,
even better. Because the real joke, obviously, being there's not enough reality in esports, but they're just including infinite reality. Go on, hit me with what this company's doing.
So, they're on Patreon. Eros, so esports Maniacos, made this announcement, and they did translate it into English. So I'm going to read it. According to sources close to esports Maniacos, KOI would be allegedly in a critical situation, financially accumulating defaults in several areas throughout the year. On October 6th, 2022, we officially knew the merger of Infinite Reality Incorporated, Rect Global, which is the company that used to own Rogue, and KOI under the name of KOI. After almost 1 year of this merger, the situation in the club has reached a critical point. Infinite Reality is allegedly dragging problems of non-payment to the company's employees, as well as to the club's content creators and the club's own players. In addition to these problems, Infinite Reality is also allegedly having problems with the LEC license payments to Riot Games. These are the franchise payments, by the way, which could jeopardize KOI's license in the top European League of Legends competition. Now, this is the same shit that I've talked about previously, which is that, at least in the LCS, these payments have been suspended for a couple of years with interest, of course. I'm not sure about the
Overwatch League playbook, if people know that. Like, when you get into trouble, because the main problem you have to understand is, much like the Overwatch thing, the worst thing that can ever happen is that the orgs publicly leave and sue you. So
or go bankrupt.
You're always going to do this approach. First things first, you say maybe you just don't have to pay as much, or you don't have to pay now. And then eventually, if it goes really bad, you do what I will do. You go, in fact, we'll pay you to leave, but please don't say anything bad. Yes. So this is not a good sign for the health of the league, by the way. Like, they've paused the payments.
Right. And it says they've been having problems. I don't know if they've paused it in LEC or not. So, but they could, and it's not unreasonable.
If you think of what's gone on the last few years.
Yeah, it's not unreasonable to think LEC could do this, or there could be a situation that would work out here. So that's actually not my biggest concern about this. So it says, due to the bad financial situation of the club, Ibai himself would have put from his own pocket a figure close to 3 million euros to try to alleviate the non-payments of the club, paying in full the salaries of some players / content creators, as well as the gaming house of the Superliga team.
By the way, just as an aside, holy fuck, what people won't get about that, Monty, is that's how, I guarantee you, that means this Ibai guy is on a totally different level, even to like the core streamers we know, like LS and Dot.
Oh, of course.
If he's putting 3 mil of his own money, that makes me think he makes like $50 million a year, guys. Like,
he does.
It'd have to be something insane like that for that to be like viable.
He literally had a stream that had 3 million concurrent viewers. I mean, he's one of the biggest streamers, if not the biggest streamer in the world right now.
In all regards. I'll always do it, mate. I'll always just be me. Don't worry about it. Listen, there's one thing I'll never get worried about. It's like, oh, you've said reality and the truth. Well, maybe reality needs to change, then you fucks. Anyway,
all this has led to a very big concern in the environment of KOI to see the project is lacking economic solvency and is generating a very large instability in the club to the point of considering the continuity of the project as such. Now, this is a very word salad translated post, but we'll try and make the best sense of it as we could. So anyway, this situation is obviously troubling. So let's talk about, for people who don't get it, what happened with Infinite Reality and this merger with Rect Global. So Rect Global created Rogue. They owned the COD team, the London Royal Ravens, as well. And they sold, you'll love this, Thorin. They sold Rogue and Royal Ravens at a valuation of $470 million to Infinite Reality. Okay.
By the way, the reason that's actually insane is, if you know, one of the things that normally pisses me off about those valuations is no fucker ever sells. So fair play. At least that one actually was sold and someone for real paid that money. Fair play.
Wait. It wasn't actually a sale. It was an equity swap. There you go. Damn it.
So close. So close.
Because I was wondering when I saw that news, Thorin, I looked at it and I said, how could they afford, because allegedly Infinite Reality is a $2 billion company. I said to myself, how could they afford to pay $470 million and not have $3 million? So of course, Thorin, you know what I found out? I just dug into some of these articles and I found out that they were bought in stock. So Rect Global,
no money ever changed hands, basically.
Was paid for the equivalent of $470 million of Infinite Reality stock. Something happened. I don't have the exact details, but it doesn't seem like cash actually changed hands, which then obviously results in how we could get to a place where they were negative $3 million because maybe they just never even had money in the first place, right? So what was Ibai's deal? So as far as I can tell, this was a branding deal. So Ibai was bringing KOI, the KOI brand, his own co-stream for LEC that he runs, his audience, right? And probably in return for that, he got equity within Infinite Reality, right? So they're using his brand.
If people don't know, there's another famous example, which was Guild Esports, one I actually did consulting with a few years ago, where everyone will tell you, Monty, to this day, because the marketing worked, oh, you mean David Beckham's org? And it's saying, no, David Beckham did a deal with them where part of his sponsorship money was then to take it as stock, and then they say he is the owner. But they make it sound like he made the org, and it's like his brainchild, which, I mean, let's be real. That's what, as far as all people think about KOI, right? So it sounds like a similar scenario.
The KOI brand, as far as I'm aware, belongs to Ibai. And so he is in a strategic partnership with Infinite Reality to give the KOI brand his stream, his brand over so that, they can, it's like what happened in Call of Duty League with Atlanta FaZe. Like FaZe is in a brand arrangement with the owners of the Atlanta FaZe COD team. It's not that FaZe actually owns that, right? It's or what NIP is doing with V5 in LPL, right?
Which, by the way, I'll just throw this out there since it's an appropriate moment. Did you know? Because this is to do with NIP in theory, in all games, say it's not CSGO related. But if people don't know, Richard Lewis published a story recently that you got to go look at. It's mental. Basically, because they're now involved with the LPL in China, China's perspective, I could almost laugh myself to sleep at this as a premise, is we don't really want the league to be political, which just means we're the ones doing the fucked up political shit. Please don't mention that. And so because of that, NIP was told privately behind the scenes, and Richard has all the internal documents, basically
all the Slack chats.
Remove everything from your Twitter that ever supported Ukraine in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Because obviously people will know the country of China does a lot of business with Russia, and it's part of that BRICS association, which is their version of NATO, sort of. So even though that means absolutely NIP has gone out of their way to scrub from history, some fucking Room 101, 1984 shit, that, what do you mean? We never supported Ukraine. That's just the world we live in now, guys. The reason I bring that up is because I'm so sick of that whack narrative people people are trying to sell now to be a sellout of like, well, maybe if we agree to work with China and Saudi Arabia, they'll like move closer to our cultural positions. Like, no, dickhead. The one with the money always sets the terms. And as has been proven in every case, you are moving towards their cultural standard, not the other way around. That's what the money's for. So anyway, it's just a quick aside story, but it's a banger if you hate scumbag orgs, because it shows how, like, if you actually get involved with the LPL, the reason I bring this up also, by the way, is people are implying TSM's going to do this. Well, I'll tell you what, the day TSM signs on, don't ever expect them to support the current thing you want to hear from. Don't ever expect them to plaster their org with Ukraine, Russia, LGBT. They won't do it. In this, essentially, it's implied you can't. So you have to sort of stay clear of that sort of stuff, which is a big. I actually think that in itself, even though it looked like a small story, because people think it's just about Duncan on NAP, I think that's a huge story, Monty. Essentially, a Western organization, most famously like based in Sweden, has just completely culturally bowed to China over like what they can and can't do on Western social media. I don't know why that's a small story. Like, to me, I would do a 4 horsemen on that topic, man. I think that's a mad one for me.
Well, especially because there are all these, Riot employees constantly virtue signaling on social media, and their own company is trying to suppress support for Ukraine in a war against Russia. It's kind of crazy. So that's the company these people work for, and they're just cool with it. They're just cool with it.
It's kind of crazy to me, I know.
So yeah, I think like going back to the Ibai thing, the brand sharing arrangement. So I think what's going on, though, it's unclear to me whether Ibai might pay the $3 million because the language is, in translation, or he has paid the $3 million. But the point is that Ibai is considering or has paid this money because I think he realizes that the PR damage to his own brand, even though he's not responsible for making these payments, right? Would be worse.
Putting your brand over the top. Like, they will think that it's you who did everything, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think maybe he thinks that it's worth $3 million perhaps and also, probably he wants to do right by the players. I would like to think there's some
maybe
nobility in this where, if he may want to, fix the wrongs that are made within the org, and make sure that people actually get paid for the work that they've done. But it sounds like an extremely serious issue. And another time where, we don't know what's going on with Infinite Reality, but I think the combination of the Web3 collapse plus the esports collapse probably hasn't done kind things to them. And Ibai is now sort of on the hook, at least in terms of PR, for whatever is going to happen with this. And also, this is just another thing that goes to show Ibai's co-stream for LEC is absolutely massive. He gets like 100,000 concurrent viewers at times, I think. And if he is unable to make money and this org is going out of business, even though they have potentially the best possible sales pipeline into LEC itself, how crazy is that? How crazy is that? Yeah, it's pretty wild. I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, like, there's going to be more reporting that comes out around this. And maybe they sell their slot.
You can't help plebs, Monty, because they're going to think, because they're fucking morons with room temperature IQ. Like, but if he makes loads, what's the big deal? It's just 3 million. Like, literally, I won't even dignify that sort of thinking with like fucking respect. You're so stupid, it's impossible. If you think 3 million's nothing, you'll never have 3 million. That's actually how money works. Like, 3 million is a lot, even if you make $400 million a year. That's how you keep $400 million. Like, 3 million on something you don't need to spend it on is enormous, mate. Like, I don't know why people think money works that way, mate. Like, this as also, how are you going to justify this in your expenses? Like, if it's 3 million now, what happens if next year it needs to be more? Like, do you even have like is there a contingency plan here? Is there like a limit you hit and then you have to just bail and you're out 10 million? Like, this sounds really bad to me, mate. People are going to think this is no big deal. He's got the money for it. It's like, no, this sounds really bad. Like I was saying, mate, dude, they've only been in the game 1 year. How in 1 year are you minus 3 million already? And we're not talking minus 3 million. It's more than that, mate. As in, you have to directly cash inject 3 million now.
Yeah.
That implies, by the way, if you don't do that now, you just fucked immediately. Like as he's saying, notice what they say there that they very softly phrase, Monty, is about how a bunch of defaults would happen. The questions I have is, what are the defaults? Is the defaults like the league slot, in which case, by the way, if you default, you're not going to be allowed in the league anymore? Is it things like, I don't know, your facilities that you have, that you have like a mortgage? What defaults are we talking about, dude? Because I don't think it is just salaries. Like, this makes it sound really alarming. Like, the company's fucked if he doesn't put his own money in.
Yeah, it does sound like that. They either can't raise more money, or the company is not willing to distribute that money to the organization because they have other ventures that they're working on that they'd rather spend the money into. So maybe they're just refusing to pay people for the work that they've done, or hoping that Ibai bails them out. But yeah, certainly it's a super bad look. I don't know. I don't know what you do with this if you're Infinite Reality. Just seems like another casualty of esports winter. But perhaps TSM will buy the old slot. You know what I mean? They were inquiring about Misfits slot previously. They were inquiring.
I just said it. My dream is Reginald's dream. I want him to get an LPL slot and then immediately have his entire life run by the Chinese Communist Party. That's my dream. My dream and his dream, same dream, it turns out. You know? That's all I want. That's all I want.
Oh, man. So, yeah, really, really rough. That's a lot of big news that we can only really talk about.
That's terrible, because remember, they were one of the success stories, Monty. It was supposed to be these orgs, Rogue joined with KOI, Misfits became, I think BDS was them, right? And then Schalke became Heretics. Maybe I got that the wrong around. Maybe it was actually Heretics that was Misfits. I think it might be that way around. But
yeah, it was Heretics that was Misfits. Yeah,
those orgs were the ones that moved over. Well, at the time, that was a mad success story, because it was like, I mean, look, a lot of them were equity swaps as well. But you remember the reports were like 37 million euros for a slot, etc. At the time, that actually made people think, dude, just the slot sales alone mean this can be like a business, and you can sort of invest and you can flip it, sort of like a penthouse suite type scenario. This makes it sound like, one, nobody's actually moving giant Brinks trucks of money around. We're just doing equity swaps and like changing numbers in an Excel spreadsheet. And then also, secondly, that everything was overhyped and like it's all just kind of a facade, and behind the scenes, everything in trouble. And like, this is, people don't get it. The reason it's called the esports winter is everyone's getting fucked by this. And because stupidly you've made a global ecosystem. That means when something happens in America that fucks things up, it fucks things up for everyone in the other part of the world as well. So we're all in the boat on the same one on this one.
Yeah.
As I'm sure a bit last year, mate, everyone in the LEC was like, lol, who cares? It's just LCS. Like, it'll be coming for you as well, idiot. Where do you think your VC comes from? It all comes from bloody Silicon Valley, you idiots. Pretty much.
Yeah. Or celebrities. I think the funniest thing is that if you go to the Infinite Reality website, these are some of the same investors from Rec Global. It's like, you know, Steve Aoki and Imagine Dragons and a bunch of like DJs and musicians.
Like, oh yeah, he was with Rogue. Yeah, I remember that. The Steve.
He was.
Guy,
yeah, he was. Yes. Steve Aoki was with Rogue. So it's the same people. But I mean, how much of the company do these people actually own? Right. That's always the question. Like 0.1%, or how much money did they really put in?
Also, you know, the other reason why I hate this idea, Monty, that people stupidly have, that the influencers will be the ones who will save us. It will be the disguised Toasts and the Tariks of the world who will make teams and then save us all with their incredible brands. Is you actual fucking idiots are so stupid, you are inadvertently trying to cargo cult create the fucking GGL hip hop league from the 2000s. That is one of the most famous meme shit concepts ever, in the, like, where Snoop Dogg actually was the commissioner and had actual rappers coming in and doing like team-based esports. Like, you're actually trying to like unironically create that though. And here's the reason, by the way, as a quick rant as to why that is a terrible idea. Notice how the disguised Toast guy came into League. He hasn't even been here like bloody 5 minutes. He came in and then did that classic obnoxious thing, which means I pray for you to fail, which is you come in and even though you've only been there 4 seconds, you go around going like you do the Jacob Wolf. You just go, everyone in this industry doesn't even bloody know what they're doing, and I'm the only one who's figured it all out. Then 1 year later, you're in the hot seat going, I'm bloody losing loads of money running this team. Like, it's millions of dollars, you know. Do you know the costs are really high and like you don't make any revenue back? It's like, no shit. We all know that. The difference is people like Jack from day one have to run a functional business. You don't. What you do is you're a big influencer, which means your personal brand gets big sponsors and money. So what happens is you take this influx of money that at the moment doesn't come from the game, it comes from your brand, and then you stupidly chose to divert that money instead of like, you know, into your finances. You chose to divert it into one of the most notorious money pits in esports having a team org. And then at the end you go, I'm just losing all my own money here. And then idiot fans go, well, I'm actually not going to learn any of these lessons. Where's the next disguised toast? It's like, you guys, you can't be helped. You cannot be helped. And half of you, by the way, I'll better doing that moron logic of that guy in the Twitch chat of like, but they make 10 million, losing 2 million is nothing to them. Bro, I wish you could just lose at that rate. I wish every time you made $100, you lost $20 of it. And I could just go, it's only 20, bro. You still got 80 left. Remember to pay the taxes on that 100 though. Like, I wish I could just do that to you. You deserve to actually be in that situation, because that was the thing that upset me the most about the LCS walkout, is I hoped when I revealed all the figures, people would just go like, whoa, this is like a really different scenario. That no, people just petulantly went like, well, if they can't make money, I guess everyone just deserves to lose money and just close the LCS down. It's like, that's your solution. It's just like to flip the board like a little kid having a tantrum and just say, let's all go home. I'm taking the ball. Like, because that solution is not a solution, Monty. I know they think it's going to happen because there's this Valorant push where like, oh my God, maybe like Ben Affleck will buy a team and then Ludwig and MonteCristo will buy in. Like, even if they do, all you're doing for real is, like I say, because they essentially have like a luxury brand where they're getting all this money as a personal influencer. Yeah, for a short time, they can chuck a bit more fuel on the fire, as it were. But eventually, they're going to run out of money and they're going to need to pay. And then secondly, all you've done is push our problem a year or two down the line. You haven't ever solved it in any way. Like, by the way, I actually think for real, if that was a viable strategy, I think someone like Riot or Blizzard would have done this. If they really could have done like an Overwatch League just with like massive influencers, and that was the, I think someone would probably have tried that. I don't think it works long run. Like I say, to me, it's just you have a bit more money that you can just piss a bit, and then eventually even you're going to face the exact same organizational problem.
I do think Disguised Toast has valid criticisms about the shittiness of brands within the esports space. And influencers are good at building brands. This is true. But the problem and why they can't be the Messiah, Thorin, is that their business is vastly different than the esports business, right? Because
it's like the thing about TSM. It's like the joke with TSM is this. The reason it never made sense to say we make money, but it's from all the guides, not the team. It's like, then why have the team, you idiot? Just get rid of the team and only make money off the guides at that point. Like, again, why would you take a healthy business and connect its life force to a dying business that only survives vampirically by like sucking the life force out of living businesses? Like, in that scenario, it's like, then I don't see what the upside for them in esports is, basically.
Right. You should just spin off the team and provide the owner the license to use the TSM brand for the team.
Perfect, right?
Right. I think when you look at it though, the way that people like Disguised Toast or Ludwig make money, a lot of the time it is through direct contributions from their viewers. A lot of their revenue comes from subscriptions, donations, right? These things where users.
That's the thing. When they have the goal to be like, this your financial model doesn't work. Hey guys, the top donator today, I'll be writing your name around my bunghole with a Sharpie later. Like, yeah, I wonder why Jack can't get your fucking deals, you cretin. Like, maybe he has like some decorum or like dignity in a human soul or something. I don't know, bro. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out as I go.
So it's just very different, because the thing is that people, for whatever reason, and we don't know the answer to this, but they are willing to pay $5 a month to Dr. Disrespect, but they are unwilling to pay $5 a month to Cloud9. Why is that a thing? I don't know. It might just be a perception thing. Parasocial relationships with an individual. We could guess a million different reasons as to why that is. But overcoming that gap has been the biggest problem. The reason why Twitch will not pay for media deals within esports is because esports doesn't make them as much money per user on the website as somebody who watches XQC, right? And when somebody pays for a subscription, Twitch is getting a cut of that every single time. But when there are no subscriptions or direct user support on the esports channels, then there's no more revenue. So why would you pay a premium to esports that generate less revenue per viewer, right? Why would you pay for a media rights deal? Doesn't make any sense. So, I think that these influencers coming in, while they themselves may be able to directly monetize their audience, and maybe there will be a way that they can do that with a team. However, the fact that no team has ever successfully done that, even with major influencers on board, like if it were true then why is Rogue/Koi in a giant hole right now? They have one of, if not the biggest streamer on the planet affiliated with their brand. And apparently they are $3 million in debt. And by the way, it's only $3 million. If you have a streamer who can get 3 million concurrent viewers and you can't make an additional $3 million, that is a huge fucking problem. Huge problem. So I suspect that it's just not possible to convert esports viewers in the same way that you convert them monetarily as an individual streamer. Oh yeah, I think it's tough. I think it's tough, and I don't know the solution to that. But I don't think that people have this magical thinking. And every time I hear, well, what about the LCS? It's like, well, get Mr. Beast in there and get this guy's toast in there, etc. It's like it might bring more viewership, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be profitable or that it will convert to sponsorships, right?
The real solution is actually obvious. The only way we'll ever teach these motherfuckers is they're going to have to actually be burned themselves, Monty. So the solution isn't a meme. You need to do Reddit Players LCS. You all need to pitch in $10 and we'll get together a nice big kitty of 20 million and we'll buy you a slot and we'll put in the players that you guys want. And when we then in 2 years, again, are like, we've got no money, you've lost it all, the burn rate's insane. You'll go, but this business doesn't make sense. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what we will tell you the whole time. Because one thing I do hate about the influencer thing, because of the parasocial relationship, is somehow, Monty, I'll never understand how myself. Somehow, because someone likes Disguised Toast streaming, when he signs a check for a pro player, Monty, he's a great guy. But when Jack, who I know inarguably has made me people millionaires in esports and done tons of good things, when he signs a similar check, he's an exploitative piece of shit. I'll never understand the connection myself. Is it because Jack doesn't draw people's names around his butthole with a fucking Sharpie? Is that the real problem he has there? Is that the sort of like communication messaging issue we're having at this point in time? And also, technically, this is unconnected to anything I've just said. I have thought of away sentinels that you might be able to make some more revenue.
Oh my God, don't you do
Pretty
it.
good. It's unconnected. What are you talking about? It's unconnected.
Don't say what it is. You know, you can just imagine that in your own mind. Unconnected. Completely unconnected.
Yeah.
Completely unconnected to other things. So you want to talk about some actual League of Legends now? It seems like a good break there.
Fuck it. Yeah.
So we didn't have an episode last week. Mentioned the LCK finals, pretty big stomp from Gen G, as we expected. Honestly, just really good read on T1 overall. I think the drafts behind these games were extremely good, very versatile. I was happy eventually we got to see KT get into Worlds at least, which should be good, even though I don't know what was going on in both of these T1 series. Again, I thought they would be more prepared this time around, right? And it turns out that they just couldn't deal with Carrier's Lulu.
I'm sure on Power Spike and your other show, I'm sure you've talked about these matches. So I'll give you my perspective. We'll come at a different angle on this one. So first things first, I'll tell you the biggest bomber about that second KT T1 series. It wasn't just that T1 won, by the way. Fair play to them. They played great. My biggest bomber was this. Right, mate, at this point in time, it's not just about like who's the better team. Some of the KT roster players, or maybe even the coaching staff, clearly have a psychological deficit or wound when they play T1. Because I thought in the upper bracket one, mate, initially I thought they were doing cocky drafts. I actually get the vibe now they're just scared, mate. They just go away from their own game plan because some of these drafts make no sense for KT. And then also, when you look at like the way these games are playing out, right, here's what's funny. These games actually almost make me look stupid for that convo in the last episode. You know when I said, but why is Lehen's the MVP? If you actually look how they drafted against KT, dude, the other teams think Lehen's the MVP. They're all like banning out all his support champions. It's mental. Like, dude, fair play. That actually almost implies maybe in scrims he is like the most cracked out member of the team. And if you don't shut him down, they win the games. I don't get it, mate. Fair play. I was wrong.
I mean, that first game, I think that KT was shook by the 8 support bans, and they really wanted Lehans to be on an engaged support, even though the Singed is just objectively
what
terrible.
A ridiculous reach. What a ridiculous reach to start a series with, bro.
It was just terrible. But I think they just got surprised in the draft and didn't have a plan for what happens when there are 8 support bans. And also, they clearly, like, T1 clearly went in with a very good game plan of let's focus on the Lulu and taking away some of Lehen's support and, like, crush through the bot lane. The real question is, why didn't they just do what Gen.G did in the final, which is ban Azir, Nico, and Xayah, which are basically the only way that T1 can win games of League of Legends because Faker is not really performing right now.
This makes me think I'm watching WWE, right? A guy who was just injured to the extent he couldn't even play the games comes back. He's not even one of the best players anyway, mate. And if anything, what did his time away show us? Like, it's actually like what he does to the rest of the team that's important, not him individually. So take away the champions that do those things. I don't get it. Like, me and Dom at this point in time, one of the few things we're totally aligned on is, it's like, I'll give you the best analogy ever because it's from sports, right? There's a thing that whenever you have a commentator in basketball, Monty, who's a former coach, they always say this thing at the end of the game where if you have some like amazing perimeter player who's good at making like the last second shot, like Kobe Bryant or Kevin Durant or someone like that, right? What the guys who are the commentators who are ex-coaches say is my number one goal in this scenario is don't let him be the one that beats me. Like what I'll do is I'll even like run a double team at him and let him pass maybe even to an open teammate because the open teammate, essentially I'll live with them hitting the shot. Like if some bomb guy I don't know from like the 6th player in the team, if he can hit like a corner 3 and they win from that, fair enough. But what I don't want to do is let their best player like break me down and get a good shot and then win the game because I'm going to feel like a fool afterwards. I don't know why coaches, it's like they mind fuck themselves away from what they know they need to do. They know on some level these are the best champions for Faker, but it's like they want to go, but imagine then if I win while he has, why? You don't need to imagine, just ban him. If you like this team, and then the old classic ones was the Misfits with Ethio, etc. Like these are the most easy teams to cripple in the draft. You literally have players that if you pinch, like what they never got to do in this scenario is what you're talking about with the Lehen's move. Where does Faker go if you ban 4 mid lane champions? Let me know what 5th champion he is not only picking, but he's going to have to pick it based on the matchup as well, bro. And remember, our mid lane is BDD. Like, we've got a guy with pocket picks, all sorts of shit. Like, I don't get when you don't do that, mate, because to me, surely the lesson of this split is Faker is the pinch. Pinch him and what he can do in the game and the team will fall apart. But instead, they decided to it's like they have to have a gentleman's agreement to let Faker play League of Legends in the same way as in the West. Me and you would have just banned Zillion and they'd never beat TSM at Worlds. But everyone was like, nah, well, you got to give him that Zillion though. So why? Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to do it?
It's also that in the 3rd game of this series, when KT was down 0-2, that's when the Azir and Nico ended up being banned. Okay. He goes on Cassiopeia. He has a very bad Cassiopeia game. And then they just give him Nico for the rest of the series. And it's not only that, it's the way KT...
Sorry, Faker, you couldn't play the game there. Let me just give you this packet. Yeah, cool. We're ready to go again, right?
It's the way KT is losing too. You know, in the 4th game, they almost lose that because Lehen's is face-checking a brush at level 1, and they insta-lose bot lane as a result of it. In the 5th game of the series, BDD gets chunked out at like level 2 in lane by Faker, and then they have this giant vacuum in the mid lane. It's like,
if you're gonna listen, I'm a layman, but if you're gonna play Veigar, maybe just play it quite conservatively early in the game. You fucking break. You know what I mean? Like the champion would dummy on this game if it had gotten going.
But it was in both of the series in T1 versus KT. KT was taking crazy risks early into the game and just like straight up losing a lane, which causes them to have to triage the game state. And, you know, in spite of that, what's crazy, Thorin, is that they did win game 4.
Yep.
It was crazy they did win that game. Shout out to Keen on Rise for being incredible and BDD on Ari for really like taking the burden off that game. And then in the 5th game, because they stole 2 Barons, they almost won that game as well. Absolutely wild. And to BDD's credit, he misplayed that lane, but the fact that he had unsealed Spellbook and they managed to get him in, he managed to kill Owner on Nocturne and then get into the pit to smite the 2nd Baron that they stole was an amazing play. It was a very, very good play. But it's just like, KT, why? Why do you have to be trying to dig yourself out of a hole, in multiple games across these two best of fives? It's just completely ridiculous and completely unnecessary. And why can't you just take away Faker's champions and see what happens? Why can't you do that?
The worst thing about this match as well was like, mate, I'm just saying right now, there's no way KT gets swept like that in the final. That at least would have been a game. This final was dog shit because T1 won this, unfortunately.
Yeah,
like because that was one of those comprehensive finals you're going to see.
Because the bans were obvious, Thorin. The bans were obvious. It's like Gumayusi, don't let him have Xayah. That's one of their main win conditions. Don't let Faker have the Azir or the Nico. Fuck it. And like, what is he going to do? Okay, well, I guess he plays Jace, Ahri, and Talia, all of which Gen.G does a very good job of handling. And I do want to give massive credit to Gen.G's coaching staff, who turned around a really complete game plan in a 24-hour period after the KT game, where they forced them onto some really like uncomfortable picks. And they had answers to everything. They had answers to Zeus being dominant on this lethality Aatrox by playing the Camille into it, right? Chovy was playing the Sylas, which isn't super common these days. But again, going back to digging out from the meta of last year, well, they have Maokai. Let's just go ahead and take the Sylas because he just has better Maokai ult later in the game. The Blitzcrank is up. That's not a pick Delight is used to playing, but they saw all of the Lulu games from yesterday. And yes, T1 did ban Blitzcrank against Lehens. Delight has not typically been a Blitzcrank player, but he pulls it out versus the Aphelios and Lulu, which is a great pick to punish in lane.
And he was smurfing in this final. He was having a fucking bang. He was one of the,
and then in the final game of the series, Gen.G fell behind. But the thing is, you're trying to play Draven into a composition that has Maokai, Cassante, Jax, Neela, and Rakan. How do you ever walk up as Draven in these fights? Like the CC Wombo combo that you can set up between engaging with Maokai ult, hitting multiple people off that Maokai ult with a Neela ult or with Counter-Strike from Jax or Rakan ult. It's like the AoE CC is just so complete that you can basically chain CC until probably 3 or 4 people are dead on the team. And so unless T1 has a really, truly massive lead and plays around picks with Talia and, Nautilus, Sejuani, and Draven, you just can't fight a straight-up 5v5. And by the way, this was FaZe's first professional game on Neela. If anything, Gumayushi's been the Neela player this split. And so we got to see new stuff from Gen.G.
That's what makes it look even worse for Gumayusi, is the Pace guy's even less experienced than you. Like, it's okay if Ruler's dumpster. He's a legendary player, like the GOAT level player. Pace is the rookie, but the joke is he makes Guma look like the fucking rookie when he plays him.
Yep.
This is just legit, mate. Like, this is going to be one of the best pieces of scouting done in years, mate. There was no hype around this guy.
Yeah.
Outside of career, at least.
I think there was no hype because Ruler might be the best player in the world right now. So why would you hope that even if this guy is coming off the bench and has a lot of promise? But again, credit to Gen.G, their development system, their coaching staff, identifying this player and getting him into a place
as well. Like, how do they find these players, man? These are bangers.
Yeah, Delight was on Breon last year, right?
And he's better and better every few months, it feels like.
Yeah. I think for me, I thought Delight performed better than Lehens this season. That was my opinion. But it looks good for Gen.G. I think T1, their flaws got exposed, but credit to Gen.G, their players are extremely flexible right now. They played a variety of different styles over these 3 games. I enjoyed the finals, Thorin, because it was a complete takedown from an individual player perspective, from a strategic perspective, from shifting up win conditions for Gen.G. They played very differently across all 3 of these games, showed mastery of these team compositions. And I think Gen.G will be dangerous going into Worlds. I'm hoping that we don't see a repeat of Chovy regressing in form or Doran having bad laning phases or Peanut kind of like inting in the late game. Because honestly, this has been Peanut's best split in the last 2 years. He's had precious few mistakes, I would say. And he's been great. I think he was definitively the best jungler in LCK.
This is where I feel like people don't keep track of like the historical trends. Dude, it's a fucking big deal to win 3 splits in a row and 2 in 1 year. Like that's not some small potato shit. So like for people like Chovy, this is what I always tell people. The problem with career narratives for players is they lag like a year or two behind. So when you actually do finally start winning stuff, if your career narrative is you were like a choker, it's like the joke is Chovy's like quietly won 3 LCK titles now. Like you do know, there's not many players in history with 3 LCK titles out of mid lane guys. Like I know he obviously had plenty he could have won in the past that he sort of blew. He's already making up for lost time though. And by the way, if they stay number 1, he's going to win more. Like this guy can end with 5, 6 LCK titles, which is probably what he was supposed to be at. So it's kind of a cool turnaround in that sense. But as you say, the problem now is, we've seen you win domestically. Now you have to actually do it at Worlds. We need to actually see the big boy performance now. Like, you don't necessarily have to win, but I want to see like a finals or something. You know what I mean? Be like actually in contention for the title.
I think it's just disappointing because when we see Gen G compete internationally, they just abandon the strategies that make them good. We talked about this on Power Spike, and Dom and I had this discussion, but at MSI, instead of playing cross map and macroing, they just opted into every team fight at Dragon. I
think that's just because the flaw is Koreans are always looking for the way to play. And so they thought, I guess, JDG had the way to play, I would imagine. So I think that was a mistake. Like, in my opinion, being stubborn sometimes better in this regard, play to your strength, right?
I guess. I just think it's not who they are. And it disregards an entire split of setting up this beautiful macro play around maximizing gold gain, playing, playing cross map for gold, and then coming into mid and late game team fights around Dragon with a substantial gold lead, and giving themselves those advantages and trusting that they were going to win the fights at 3rd and 4th Dragon, which had been the hallmark of their play that won them the LCK title. And then they opt into this entirely different style versus JDG and BLG that doesn't suit them whatsoever. And like last year at Worlds, we saw Chovy lose all sense of macro. And honestly, last year at Worlds was their Worlds to win. That was their shot. That was maybe the best shot they're ever going to have at winning Worlds, truly, because they had Ruler on the team at that point in time.
They had won that game 5 against I think they would have won Worlds, mate.
Yeah. But they played really badly by their own standards. Like, it was very disappointing.
I mean, they almost even fucked up and lost a damn one. Like, that even almost happened too. So it was a bit of a whack Worlds,
They played super badly compared to what we had seen in the LCK and their super dominant, summer run last year. And it was really quite disappointing to me and people who want to see this team play their style on an international stage. So there's always that fear now after MSI and after Worlds that they are not going to do that again. And this Worlds, they're not even coming in as the favorite, right? Like, they were, I think, coming in as the favorite last year. And this Worlds, like, it's clearly JDG that is going to be the favorite for the World Championship. Anything else from a title, I think, besides the title, is a disappointment for that team. I guess it'll depend on the meta, but I think it's tough to say that someone besides JDG should be winning. It's the team that has looked so dominant this entire year, hasn't lost a single best of 5, and is a actual true super team that seems to be functioning well, and people know their roles and are not trying to overreach or do things that don't make sense. It's well coached, well put together, everything. So I don't know, man. I think it's going to be rough, but I'm hopeful that Gen G can at least do something, perhaps make the finals, like you say, but it'll be hard for them to actually win the title, I believe. As for T1, unless Faker has some really big rehabilitation in the coming months, I think their floor is high, but their ceiling is kind of low. For a team,
if I'm T1, I mean, I've said this in the past, but I think this is the split that justified it. The problem in the past was your domestic win rate in the regular split was too good. So you had to sort of think, well, there's still something there with the roster. Let's hope they develop more or get over the hump or whatever. Like, unless they win this World, if I'm them, I'm blowing this squad up. Like, I'll keep a couple of players. If you keep Faker, great. If you keep Zeus, great. If you keep Owner, great. a couple of players have to change out. Like I don't think people know how long this lineup has played together. It's quite a lot of fucking games now. Like they've had a very healthy time span. Like if it just doesn't work this time, you've got to just crack on and go with a different approach.
You can't continue to disappoint at this level. Like you have lost both of the international finals you were in with this roster. You didn't make the international finals of the last international tournament. You've lost 3 of the 4 domestic titles during this time period. There is something that is bothering this team that has led them to underperform in the most critical moments. And so it's got to change. I agree.
I mean, this is where I'm just good at doing this, mate, irritating fans. It goes like this. If you give Faker the credit when they win the series and when they go far, then spoiler, when they lose 5 straight finals, that makes Faker a choker by definition.
He hasn't performed well in a lot of these finals either.
Because the real problem is this. It's one thing, Monty, if you're like a really sick underdog and you just keep reaching finals and losing to like the team you support. Dude, they're like even money or a favourite in most of these finals. Like even on this last one, on paper, Gen G was the big favourite, right? But Gen G has like rookie players still. Like there's a world where you could have made the case of like, this should be a nice matchup. Like T1's got chances. Like that's the other thing. It's the way they lose these finals is so underwhelming. Like they don't do, like put it this way, in these series we're talking about for the last like year where KT keeps losing these 5-game series to T1, they can lose and at least go to sleep and go, hey, we almost won that, or we were right in it, or maybe we should have won game 5. It's almost never the case with T1. Like they just have like conclusive games, like especially the game 5s. The game 5s are nearly always shit in the finals that T1 loses. And in this case, forget any narratives of Chovy and Peanut choking. You can't even get a game off them. You can't even activate any world where they have to think about it or second guess. They're just cruising to victory. Just easy for them at this point. Because I think it's tragic how many fucking finals they've lost now, mate. Yeah, they think even just by accident you win one. You know what I mean? You think you just have like a Baron steal in the game and win one of these motherfuckers. It just never happens for T1. It's like they actually conclusively can't win.
It's also that if you think about Faker's historic run of titles, oftentimes he was the biggest player in these finals. He was the one pulling out picks like mid-Riven into Cassiopeia that nobody had ever seen before and completely dominating. Like he was the clutch player. He was the clutch player doing something completely unique and crushing his opponents and being the tip of the spear for T1's victory. And now he's had some good semifinal performances on an individual level, but he can't actually, like, he is oftentimes, I would say, the reason why his team is losing in some of these finals. Like he did put up a pretty bad performance in the finals of Worlds last year, in spite of having some really good semifinals games with Rise. Where is the clutch performance? Like, who is the one who steps up and carries T1 in the big games and the most important games? And the answer has been nobody, right?
It's what kills me as well. It's funny because I'm a massive skeptic of Gumayushi. I've never actually thought he was ever close to the best ADC in the world. He's just been a good player at times. But here's what's sad. I actually think he's gotten better and better as a performer over the years in T1. The one that always kills me is Zeus, mate. Because he is the one where, if it's the regular season, he is one of the best. He is arguably the best Korean top laner. He's a contender for best top laner in the world. But every time I see him in the final, he just does fucking nothing, mate. Or just gets like inexplicably dumpstered even. Like, it's bizarre because that has to be a mental thing, mate. It's nothing to do with skill. I know he's a good player, but in these finals, it just something, a switch flips and he just cannot win. He cannot win somehow. Like, think about the people he's losing to. I'll at least give it to Faker, mate. He's losing to Chovy and fucking Knight. Like, these are god players. Zeus is losing to fucking Doran and Kingen, and it's like, bro, what is your resume that you're losing to? You're making these guys legends.
I think one of the biggest.
Thorin has 3 straight LCK titles, Monty.
Come on, man. Outrageous.
I don't even hate on him, but like, fucking hell, come on, 3 in a row. At this point, if I'm Doran, it's like I say about Beryl, just go evil. Just start embracing being the villain. I want you to actually rock up, and bear in mind, my boy Flame has 0 LCK. Just be like, where the rings at, motherfucker? Just have like 3 rings, like Tom Brady's like, yeah, what the fuck? Like, just start flexing that you're a champion at this point. Why not? And even play, by the way, even though, in fact, here's the joke, Monty. Doran is reverse or bizarro Zeus. Because in the regular season, Doran always just looks like, whatever, he'll be a liability internationally. But in the finals of these tournaments, he's always fucking good. He actually is pretty good in these finals, to be fair.
He is. And I think that's exactly what you want out of a player. Because if your game plan is based, or if you can win games while Doran is running it down in lane, then imagine how good you're going to be when he actually just overperforms. The problem with the problem with Zeus is this. Zeus has these good regular season performances. So no doubt, as a GM and as the coaching staff, you are building your game plan around Zeus's performance, which is very consistent in the regular season for the most part. It was he fell off when Faker left, but I think that was just mostly a mentality thing because he bounced right back when Faker returned, and we saw some really good performances again. But what do you do when you reach a final and you are your game plan and the way your team operates, your synergies with your players, your focus in your draft is around Zeus? What happens when he doesn't show up in those finals? You have spent an entire year of practicing a certain way to play a certain way, and then it just all goes out the window. So at that point in time, you have to reevaluate your entire team with the assumption that he is not going to be the carry player. But yet, he is going to demand a contract as a superstar player. It's hard to justify keeping him.
I think it was the last episode where we pointed out that like this is going to be the greatest off season ever for LCK, where all the crazy, like wasn't even like Cade available as well. Like it's fucking, it was like every position there's like
including Zeus, it's Zeus, Carrier, Gumayushi, Deft, Canyon, Showmaker, Keen, Aiming. BDD is still under contract. Faker is still under contract. Owner is still under contract. Like basically everybody else is not.
By the way, there's another reason why you potentially consider a Gumayushi replacement, because you're pairing someone with Carrier. Like you can take you could have like fucking Viper and put him with Carrier and see, let's fucking start cooking with gas.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, that's another thing. By the way, let's talk about that for a second. Everyone's memeing on KT and T1. No, Hanwha Life are the ones who can fuck right off right now. You don't even go for Worlds. You actual bombs. You don't even get there. So, like, the reason why that kills me, mate, is Viper, to me, is one of the most, like, bona fide eye tests. Like, this guy is amazing at League of Legends players. Like, if this player isn't just screaming out to be on a better team, like, if I'm someone like T1, I'm just, the second, like, the availability happens, I'm just ringing his phone off the hook, mate. Like, it's a slam dunk to sign a player like this. Is just too good.
Well, Deft will also be a free agent, so we could see the Deft Faker super team construction.
For some reason, Deft has to play in every team except Fakers his whole career. By the way, that's a random detail people won't know because they don't keep track of these things. I looked it up. By qualifying for this Worlds, DAM1, Deft will have now been to as many Worlds as Fakers. They've both been to 8 at this point in time. That's amazing. That's another reason why Deft is like a GOAT candidate. Like his longevity also is impossible. It's just,
and he was great. He was great this year, honestly, on a fucking dumpster team for the most part, or a team that had a lot of problems, and he was basically never the problem. And he still led the league in like damage per minute, despite the fact that he had not a lot of help. Let's put it that way. Not a lot of help. So yeah, I'm glad D+ is going. They did look better, I will say, in the regional qualifiers.
If you do sign Deft, he's already played with Carrier, mate. That might even be like a fucking perfect connection to make, right?
That's a good point. Yeah. If you keep Carrier on as well. Yeah, I think when you look at Hanwha Life, it's obviously people will be disappointed because there were factors exterior to the game that were affecting this team, but it's not like Clid was performing, right? Getting Grizzly thrust into the limelight when he clearly has a lot of potential issues in the early game. Like, yeah, he can kind of carry on the Viego in the late game if he can farm up, but he isn't really doing anything. He's like actively avoiding the enemy jungler in the early game. And so when we see teams play against them, like we saw in the regional qualifier with KT, it's very easy to focus the bottom side of the map, play for early dragons, and then force Hanwha to fight you at like 3rd and 4th dragon with a bot lane deficit. And what do you do in that case? Like Viper may not have the gold to carry the game, and you can get them to commit to engagements earlier than perhaps they would like. And it's hard. I think it's hard to do that.
All I would say is just have your world champion solos carry the game. What's the problem? Oh, they're not actually that good. Well, who knew? Give me a break. Give me a fucking. By the way, I will say there is a degree to which the meta did almost say, like, it was almost like Riot was like, I explicitly don't want Zika to go to Worlds again. Like, they did go pretty hard against him, like, right when he needed it, to be fair. Like, because remember, there's no world. Like, you can't. Here's the thing, guys. You might think if you watch LEC and watch SK, like, but Searchers can play in a Akali game. Yeah, like one. You can't play like 5 best of 5 games on fucking Akali and win the game, can you? It's not going to happen. So, to be fair, in that sense, it is fair that those players don't get to go. It's just whack because, dude, Hanwha really was. Now everyone's going to memory hole this, just like they did with T1 being bad. Hanwha Life really was upticking. I actually don't blame them on paper, KT, for picking T1. I get it. I get the logic of why they thought that was the good move. Yes, now it's egg on their face in hindsight. But at the time, that did look like it made sense. Like, Hanwha looked like they were certainly going to get one of the 4 spots.
Yeah. And they should have, based on the spend, right, that they were making. And also because D+ was a mess. Showmaker didn't look good for a lot of this year. Kana couldn't carry the game when he had the resources. Kellen and Bible were swapping in and out. They had serious late game shot calling problems. And now D+ looks like Showmaker is kind of back in form. They still don't, I would say, have the strongest late game shot calling. But if they can play through bot lane and Showmaker and kind of just have Kana on weak side, that's a way that they could potentially do well. Their strengths remain in terms of flexibility of champion pools, the ability to swap picks between various players because Canyon's pool is so deep and he plays weird junglers. Yeah, I thought they looked a lot better. But Hanwha, they bought Zeka and Kingen at the absolute peak, which was crazy because we said that, yeah, the meta hit right, but these guys are probably patch Zergs. And for people who love Zeka, shouldn't we have seen more development from this guy this year? His champion pool hasn't really changed very much, and he hasn't actually demonstrated the expertise we know he's capable of on Akali and Sylas on any other champions, really. Maybe Yone, you could say, but he needs to be able to play a lot of champions at a consistently high level, and that hasn't been the case. His Azir is up and down. His Tristana he brought out, but how can this guy, after another full year of competition, just not have kind of reached the next level? Like, I think he's just capped at this point in time.
Oh, yes. He's never going any better, mate. He's an all right player, but
he's fine.
He's better than this.
But he's not going to join, the upper ranks of historic LCK players unless he actually can diversify his champion pool and play a variety of different styles, which, hasn't been there for him.
By the way, here's another example of how narratives lag in your career. This is the 6th LCK title for Peanut, if people don't understand. Right? You are aware that's more than like Bengi, Dandy, or pick whatever names you like, all the greats, that's more than all of them. I love shit like that, by the way. One thing I love about sports and esports in general is even if you don't actually like kill the like movie narrative, like for example, it's not like Peanut overcame being like the choker and is now like the most insanely clutch player. He hasn't done that. But what he showed is there's other ways to win. Like Peanut is a player that shows that thing of like, turning up's half the battle. Like, just get to loads of finals, and if you're a great player, some of them will go your way. You will eventually get some rings. And in this case, because he's just endured, and mate, this guy's been at the top for years now. We're talking, 7, 8 years? Like, this is really long time. Like, he's finally got all his rings. Like, fair play. I love it when people sort of come good at the end and they finally get all like what they deserve,
And he got all those titles while being in China for a year as well. He wasn't even in the LCK the entire time. He wasn't in for most of the time. And he's done it across 3 different teams. He's gotten titles, 3, 4. So it's been a variety of different rosters, and arguably he should have gotten some when he was on Rocks.
Because it's Rocks, KT, no, it's SKT, Kingzone and Gen G, 4 different squads. That's another thing. By the way, there's another factor. The reason why I bring this up, by the way, is because no one ever corrects the narrative. Like, you are aware, just that fact alone, 6 titles, means Peanut gets to be in, like, greatest jungler ever discussion. Now, you might disqualify. Maybe iTest would say, no, whatever. Maybe you're a fan of some player who had a dominant year. But that means he gets to be in the convo. It's the same shit, basically, Monty, that Khan did. People only ever focused on the fact that Khan used to, like, choke internationally. And they somehow missed that he himself had won, like, 6 championships or something. Like, man, that is incredible. If you can win domestically, like, an elite region, 6 championships. You were one of the best to ever play. Like, you are a GOAT candidate. Like, you deserve to be in the convo, whether you get picked or not.
Especially because I know that Peanut is the main shot caller on this roster. And I imagine that if you remove Peanut from this team, the T1 effect happens as if you remove Faker. I think he's incredibly important to the way in which this team plays and the way in which it functions. And I think the combination of Peanut and Score, their coach, is one of the greatest strengths of Gen G, because those two minds together have produced a very unique style in the way that Gen G play and win the game, and the way that they use the resources that they have, right? Pays, I think, as a rookie, was able to slot into a system where he could be successful because his role within the team was very well defined, and because Ruler has a play style that was similar to Pays in terms of being kind of the ultimate team fight cleanup AD carry, where it didn't require Pays to take enormous risks. So if Pays can kind of just slot into that job and knows very clearly what his job is, then players like Peanut and Chovy can really set him up for success. So I think
what you do, I'll tell you how you offset. Here's the hedge, Monty. The way you hedge against the eternal, perennial disappointment of KT Rolster is you just to remind yourself that Score and Maffa are the coaching staff of Gen G. So technically the Gen G ones sort of count if you're a KT fan. They're still titles, mate. They're still KT players winning championships, you know. A KT championship by any other name, Monty, would it not smell as sweet? You know?
I mean, Score started winning titles almost immediately. One split after he started coaching. It took him like 7 years to win his first title.
If this guy can ever actually get up there and win worlds and stuff, why wouldn't he be in the GOAT coach conversation? He's already building up his domestic resume like a motherfucker.
He's literally won every title except for his first title as a coach, in which he made the finals. Pretty good. Pretty good. And also, I think it's just the way that, because Gen G is a very cerebral macro team, that's where a coach can have a lot of effect, right?
Oh, his fingerprints clearly seem to be on the team.
And also their drafts have been generally, I mean, look at the finals. These drafts were really good, I think, against T1. The preparation is there. The knowledge is there. Looks really good. So I'm hopeful for Gen G, but I've been razor caked by them at international performances where I just scratch my head wondering why they don't play their style. And perhaps that will happen again this year. I think with KT, I'm a little obviously concerned about them given their performance towards the end.
At least they go to Worlds, so that will be fun. It'll still be fun to watch them mix it up.
I'm also glad that D+, I feel more confident about LCK because of the way that D+ performed in regionals. I thought the 4th seed would be kind of garbage. But if Showmaker is really back in form, this could be a team. And as always, everything we say about D+/Damwon, they adapt to metas quickly because of their large champion pools, and they can win against everybody. The talent is on this roster. The talent is 100% on this roster. So you can never fully discount them. Have they ever lived up to the expectations over the last couple of years? No, they haven't. They've fallen short. But you just know that on the right patch or with the right confluence of factors of motivation, maybe they can get it done.
Jungle meta just flips, or you get some like insane deft pocket pickers that, you know, like there's a bunch of angles you could see where suddenly they would do like a miracle run or something.
Yep.
And also, it's just another team where, again, like, remember, we're doing the expectations of LCK. Yes, in LCK, Damwon is mad under. Mate, put them against all these fucking shit at LCK, LEC teams I'm watching. Let me see everyone who wants to tell me Death is washed. Then let me see your beloved Berserker tear him up. Then can I see that match, please? Or yeah, I think G2 is playing sick now. Well, then let's have them against T1 and see how they do. You know what? I want all these matches, mate. It's why I really hope the Swiss does throw up like some awesome combinations, because that's the one good thing it can do is obviously, like, in theory, you don't know who plays who, so you can have some really wild matchups, couldn't you?
Right. And I think when you look at something for you, Thor, when you look at LCS, speaking of matchups, I blew Dom's mind with this because he hadn't actually thought about it. Think about the mid laners that are going to Worlds this year from LCS.
Mental. Remember, the LPL and LCK ones is like the Hall of Fame of the best mid laners ever. If you look at the LCS one, think it through, guys. Like, it's like Gory, Palafox, MNS, and who's the fourth one?
APA.
APA, there you go. Enough said, mate. Enough said. The joke is that sounds like I'm reading a fucking Wikipedia entry of what the Academy League was 3 years ago in LCS, you idiots. Like, oh, and they get a ticket to the finals where they'll see the real professional players. Like, they're going to Worlds. This is Worlds. Remember, mid lane's the most important position in the game.
I mean, Gory has been kind of legit in previous years, and he was the best mid laner, but he had some really terrible performances in the playoffs. So I'm at least hopeful that Gory can kind of get it back together.
The thing.
This is a player who did pretty well, like on Nongshim and LCK.
Sure. Here's the thing. I won't hate on Palafox because in some sense he isn't even supposed to be here. He's overperformed. And he's also quite young in his career, to be fair, at the LCS level because he was stuck in academy all those years. The one that I can tell you right now, just, you know what, mark this moment in the VOD. If I'm wrong, great, make a meme compilation. I won't be, so get ready. I tell you what, this Worlds is going to be where Cloud9 has to radically change their lineup after this tournament, mate, because the solo laners of Cloud9 are going to get fucking stomped in this tournament. MNS and Licorice are going, and Fudge are going to get absolutely brutalized. MNS especially, like, there's no way. Mate, that whole thing where at the end of the spring split and like briefly at MSI, there was a little window where like, there's some potential here. Remember, dude, people were even doing that story where cause at MSI, he like was talking to Chovy. They were like, he wants to play in LCK one day. Well, get the fucking Nongshim spot ready for him, motherfucker, because it ain't going to be for a good team. Are you kidding me? Like, everyone, because Cloud9, so much of the summer split was supposed to be leagues ahead and everyone just assumed they'd win. Dude, everyone gave MNS a fucking pass, mate. I don't get it. He had a bunch of games that were just trash this split. A whole bunch. Like, we're talking like, I need more than one to count them. Of course. In the playoffs, he was criminal, mate. He's one of the reasons they didn't win.
Yeah. I think I've said this for weeks and weeks and weeks, which is that there's no way MNS is on Cloud9 next season. And I think he will get dusted at this Worlds. If he's getting rocks like this in some of these domestic events, like Palafox overperformed.
Mate. That reminds me, I've got an angle for you. You won't have seen this because you aren't a dedicated viewer of Travis Gafford Industries content. But every now and then, like a masochist, thought I knew him back in the day. Every now and then I'll watch the odd piece. And he did a piece which I thought was really funny. But mate, it actually aged so poorly for the LCS. Did you see this bit? Before the finals, because like obviously there was the low bracket match, then the finals, Travis did a funny skit where he walked around with a camera and he would just ask people, do you know who this pro is? And he had a pro with him. And the pro was Palafox from NRG. He walked around with him and he would ask people at the finals, Monty, fans who have gone to the finals, do you know who this player is? Most of them didn't know who it was. And he then won the LCS. When he won the LCS, it's only then that I clicked in like, holy shit. Travis is inadvertently exposed that like even the people who go to the games really are just people like, I was a big fan of Scar. It's like they don't know shit about the corner. That's so depressing. Like, because you're all now going to pretend, I was loving Palafox's story. It's so inspirational. Like, no, you don't know who he is. Essentially, if he's even stood next to Travis Gafford, you're just like, who is this? A friend of yours, Travis? Like, no, it's only the fucking guy about to win the championship, you idiots. Like, no one knows these guys, mate. No one knows them. No one knows them. And here's the saddest one. I don't even count in that 4 players you're giving me. I don't even count the APA guy, mate. He's barely played anything professionally. Like, it's actually totally reasonable if he gets dumps. And if he can even have the odd pop-off, I'll give him a lot of fucking leeway because he's so fresh. He hasn't even played a whole split, I give him a break.
Yeah, it's not about APA. Like, obviously, Liquid had a bad mid lane situation, and it's good to give this experience. And, they managed to make Worlds with it, which is, again, more of an indictment of North America as a region than anything else, and the failure of Golden Guardians to definitively make it to Worlds, even though they are favorites, I think, when it comes to that 4th place match, given the state of LEC right now. It is just crazy. And I do think Palafox had a very good playoffs run, and I don't want to take away him having a good run of form. And perhaps he has hit the next level. I think he has performed well on a variety of different champions, and he was definitively the best mid laner within the LCS run.
Yeah, he was that.
But at the same time, if that's the new ceiling of mid laners within the LCS, that is hugely problematic.
I mean, spoiler, I've mentioned it a million times, but fucking Rookie didn't make it to Worlds again. And by the way, he's still really good. He's still really good. I mean, we just said it, fucking Zika, who I don't think is that good, but he's better than these players. Even he didn't make it. Like, mate, this is dire when we send in these players.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think when we look at LCS right now, it is very, very difficult to get excited because it feels as though the individual player gap is just
the angle, like
crazy.
The only angle you have in theory, right, is the Berserker angle, right? But he plays ADC. Like you're not gonna 1v9 the game. The real joke, and this is the real true indictment of the LCS region. If I actually had to pick for real, the one hope you have of a sexy BO1 at Worlds, it's that Summit actually just gaps someone in lane. That's it.
Yeah.
Mate, that can happen, by the way. You get the right matchup. That's not impossible, but I doubt you're going to win many games off that. That's the problem, you know.
I think if Golden Guardians returns to form, they actually have a shot as well. If it's regular season Golden Guardians and not playoffs Golden Guardians, I think there's a chance. They did okay.
The problem is they
did okay at MSI.
They have some pretty big fundamental flaws at the moment, though, is the problem. So
in a best of one,
we'll see on that.
In a best of one, they might be able to do something. But the Berserker thing, he has won V9 games. I think what's so interesting about C9 as a team is that a lot of times they are unwilling to just let him carry on hyper carries. Like, you're on Ashe now, Berserker. Really? You think that's the best use of Berserker? I'm not sure that that's it. I understand why you're trying to do the things that you do because you think that the strategy is good. But if you have a player who can just gap other players and can hyper carry you to victory, just let him do it, man. Let him cook.
Yeah, but this is also why the West will never be good, Monty. Because you know what? As much as I always thought it was actually mad disrespectful, in China, they really will just be, hello, we have a guy called Uzi. You are all just four supports to him. He will do what he wants. They won't do that in the West, mate, because here's the problem. They can't handle the idea that essentially you are sub-communicating. All the rest of you in this room are sort of trash, and he is just a god. Give him everything he needs. Like, they can't simultaneously have that be reality, which it is, but also then have their feelings hurt of like, what do you mean though? Like, I am a good guy from, I don't know Australian accents, so I can't make this segment as funny as it should be, but you have a guy, well, I'm a viable player in my own right, and I have my own ideas. The joke is, it really is like some Ayn Rand novel, where like, but I want to contribute my ideas and have my take. You're a shitter, I'm a genius, let me do what I want. Let me do what I want. Let me cook. Exactly, let me cook.
Oh, so yeah, I feel pretty doomed this year, even more than most normal. It's doomed every year, but it feels particularly doomed. That's why
I've already decided. I know what I'm doing. I'm just going to my villain arc. I'm just gonna literally. I've already said this on Best Damn League Show. If you watch that, it'll be out as a VOD by now, I'm sure. I'm just gonna do things like hope that Adam plays the shy, stuff like that. You know, I'm in it. I'm here to watch the world burn now, Monty. I'm just here for evil. That's it. I want to see Parlor Fox against Knight. I want to see all the matchups, mate. I want to see Ruler against fucking. Let me think. Who would I pick for that one? That one probably should be Yon from Team Liquid. Ruler against Yon. There you go. Enjoy that one. 2 Koreans, right? 2 Koreans. Give me a fucking break. The joke is, after seeing this particular split of LCS, I think all the Korean imports should be given an honorary green card. You're not even real Koreans. You're all, there you go. Welcome to America. You're all Americans now. There you go. Problem solved. Ellis Island. Here's Thorin, like, you know, the Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island. Welcome in. Come on in. We'll take all your grifters, grinders, your masters players.
Slackers,
come,
especially.
Come on, exactly.
Too good. Yeah. I don't feel too much more optimistic about LEC either, if I'm being honest. A lot of these matches.
The Twitch chat got that one. It should be LS Island, not Ellis Island. There you go. Okay. You got that one.
He sends over his Koreans. He's like, take these berserkers.
Yes. By the way, that is one of those areas where, even though he's a meta man, LS is so fucking egregious. Because he will sort of be like, you know, and I'm the one who recommended Berserker. Like, that's all you did. Berserker did the rest. Like, we can't acknowledge that, right, LS? It is him being brilliant at the game and doing like, it's not like you make it sound like, you know, you fucking jump started the car and then it went off and won the race. Like, you sort of did it. It's like, you just said, like, anyone with eyes, he's pretty fucking sick. Like, yeah, fair play. That's good. That is good. Also, here's the worst thing. I'll tell you right now, because I don't know if you've seen some of this, but there keeps being this like mini flare up of the drama again on LS's stream, where what happens is, even though LS Monty, this is what's so weird about this scenario. Even though he himself expressly will not just tell the full story of what happened, and Jack from Cloud9 also doesn't want to tell the full, they can't stop lightly hinting at something that may or may not have happened, and whether that did or didn't. And so every time they both do this bitchy little thing, like, well, actually, how would he know about that? Well, I do know about that because I've got people inside the. Well, even if you do though, you don't know everything about that, but I do know because I know about it. But you never. It's always a blue balls at the end. You never get the payoff because they never then just do say the thing. And the worst thing is, low key, that's just playing in LS's hands, Jack, because for him to constantly be able to go like, I have a secret, but I can't tell you. That's just like that's his fucking brand, isn't it? Being mysterious and I wish he'd tell us about it. Oh, I can't, it's all fucking. And that whole thing just kills me because it was like 4 weeks or so. Like we were acting like it was like they were like Kobe and Shaq. They didn't play together for like 8 years or something. Like it was like 4 weeks and we just can't ever get past it no matter what happens now.
I think
the event horizon of LS and Cloud9.
I think what's so funny about this is that it's just an unsolvable problem because on the one hand, LS can use it to continue to drum up mystique around himself. Yeah. And on the other hand, Jack is one of the most conflict avoidant people that I've ever encountered. Yep. And so he won't tell the truth because he doesn't want to deal with like high level drama and information that would come out in a back and forth. So it'll just be never solved, I guess. We just have to deal with this until the end of time.
Exactly.
Just funny. Just funny. But I don't think Jack is ever gonna...
As a random aside, I will say this though. Bear in mind, I don't do any shows with us, so I have no other way to say this to him. I will say, in a fucked up way, how did we accidentally backdoor into an LS meta where, unironically, this is what we've all been saying on my European show. It's actually true, Monty. If all you had done from the end of LEC summer till the season finals was have your jungler play Ivan, you unironically actually would be in a really good spot. It sounds like some mad LS meme advice, but it's sort of true. That actually is a really good meta pick right now.
Yeah, it's great.
It actually is.
There were some changes to Ivern, but I do think that
yes.
It's just good. I mean, it is also just good, and he was right about it.
But it's his Time Lord Genja moment, isn't it? Like, it doesn't have to totally be too money. It's about the narrative, isn't it? You got to crowbar it and make it work.
Yeah. So LEC though, have any thoughts on this last week of competition? It's a bit sad to see XL just completely underperforming in that exit.
The problem is XL basically did get cynically drafted against and completely exposed. Like that's why it was so fucking whack that series they played. And then also to me, mate, if you ever wanted proof that G2 must again be winning every scrim and can do whatever they want, this looked like one of the worst fucking, considering they won 3-1 and are going to cakewalk this region. This was dog shit, this series they had against BDS. It was really bad League of Legends, mate. Like, remember, the one thing we had left, because we already lost Cloud9, the one thing we had left was at least G2 was going to be super sick at Worlds. Like, they look better, but they look average against LEC, mate. Just sad.
I think there was some experimenting going on within this, like the Evelyn pick, for example, certainly was pretty ineffective.
Yeah, I noticed in League, experimenting always means it didn't work. Like, what about when you experiment, we go like, I've never tried having a beer, getting my dick sucked, and having cocaine. You know what? Fucking hell, I might not do it again, but that was brilliant. It's never like that, is it? Their experiments are like, what the fuck? Now I have no dick left. What? Like, why is it? Why? If you experiment, it should work every now and then, surely. Like, I thought personally, Monty, I thought blind picking Braum every game was an experiment. I thought that was pretty good experimentation. Their experimentation, more like a mistake you make in college and never talk about years later until you're in therapy, you know?
Is that what Yike's going to be talking about in therapy? The Evelyn pick.
Exactly. It's just going to be on a couch somewhere, isn't he? I felt invisible in the whole game. What was I doing? Oh, bloody hell. It was a bridge too far. I'll never be Yankos. It's okay. It's okay. No one will be. Oh, bloody hell. I'll never be Yankos, though, will I? It's a better way of fair play to him, but he did get better every split, I have to say.
I think Yike is performing pretty well right now. G2 is just head and shoulders above everybody else. So if they have some interesting selections and draft. I don't really hold that against them. They bounced back really well in that series. I think with Excel versus Fnatic, this was really just felt bad because Fnatic also can't play the game of League of Legends correctly and can't convert on massive leads that they're given in some of these games. So I didn't leave this series feeling good about Fnatic. Obviously, Excel, once we see the Tristana, Maokai Rumble bans come through, which was kind of how Mad Lions exposed them as well. Turns out that you could just drop that Tristana ban and pick it yourself, and you'll actually play better if you're humanoid. But Fnatic also just had some really low points in this series. It was a very, very disappointing best of 5 from a gameplay perspective. And I don't know how anybody can leave feeling good. And obviously Oscar was injured within that series, which certainly probably affected things, but it didn't affect Humanoid's teleport button, for example. And by the way, Thorin, here we have another emergency substitute. Wonder, of course, is he on Fnatic's roster? No, of course he isn't. Does Fnatic have a substitute top laner on their roster? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Are they allowed to emergency sign Wonder, one of the best LEC top laners in history, for the rest of the playoffs? Yes, they are, apparently.
I don't know how that makes any sense, by the way. Like, think of the same scenario. I'll give you a similar scenario. Obviously, it won't work totally because there'd have to be someone without a contract like Wonder. But let's imagine, I'll give you the weird one example. Okay, let's say, Monty, that like Perks in Vitality, for example, had some arrangement with Vitality that if he didn't make Worlds, they'd release him and he didn't have a contract anymore. Imagine now if BDS goes, oh, by the way, Nook's having mental problems, so we're just going to bring Perks in and he's just going to play the next series. By the logic of all the fans just saying nothing, that's cool.
Yeah.
What I don't get about this is those rules are incredibly strict. Like, I'll tell you something. In Counter-Strike, we even have it in that game where if you'd even played like the minor for a different team, you couldn't swap and play on a different team in the major. Like, you were eligibility roster locked and you couldn't play. Like, I actually think it's mental. Like, as you say, if you already have a sub-top laner, game over. There's no way you're getting a player who isn't on your team. It's maybe there's a case if you have no sub, we can find a way that you can still sign someone. And then, yes, someone who isn't on a team would be appropriate. But I'm with you, Monty. This is EG all over again. It doesn't make any sense why you're allowed this substitution. As far as I can tell, you just know fans would like to see Wonder play, so he's allowed to play. Isn't that it? Like, what's the justification for it?
They have a team in the ERLs called Fnatic TQ that has a Danish top laner named Doxy. I just don't understand when you have a player on your roster isn't this what academy teams are for? Right? And how can you just make a substitution of this player, especially because now we don't know what happened to Oscarinen's hand. But this injury, like, we have to know the nature of this injury, because if it's something that he did to himself, you're shit out of luck, guys. Like, I just don't understand. The roster lock has occurred. If your player is injured, you use a reserve player in sports. Are we or are we not a sport? Yeah, it fucking sucks. Sometimes a player gets injured and it ruins the team's season.
You know what sucks the most about this fucking precedent / loophole that you're opening? You're now leading to a world where, look, obviously this won't really happen because life isn't this fucked up. But it's now possible, Monty. We're now going to have a world where next year there's a really hard conversation going on for the season finals of like, look, I know it's going to hurt a bit, but you have to let us break your arm because we need to bring in like Alfari. Yep. He's willing to play and he's better in the matchup than you. So like, but it's my arm though. But if you break the arm though, you know how it works for Riot, then you get the spot. So listen, take this edible and just look at the other way. Think of England. And listen, it'll be like that movie Escape to Victory, if anyone knows. Basically, when there's a big siren goes off, we'll just crack it really quick. Ready? I don't want to live in that world. I don't know if you guys enjoy that Black Mirror episode, but I don't want to live in that world.
You don't even have to do that because, as the Danny situation showed, if you are under acute mental stress, that is also a reason for it.
That I'll fill in here is because you play solo queue every day, everyone qualifies for being under acute mental stress and sort of mental strain that no normal human in humane conditions should have to put up with. And also, Yumi exists in the game, so it's close to honor. I believe we get the substitution right.
It's absolutely wild because who's responsible for evaluating this, right? And as we found out, when we were the ones saying this could be abused in the Danny situation, it turned out it was being abused by EG because they knew and pushed him to the brink.
Remember, dude, people will forget this. When we first talked about that topic, Monty, we made it explicit. It was all a hypothetical. It was all potentially like speculation on what could happen if you allowed abuse of the rule and the precedent. And the maddest thing is, like the double lift leader thing, it actually turned out not only was it happening, but we even then got like evidence it was. Like, that's so ridiculous in itself. But I hope people get that, like, now, why we point out when there's like a potential for abuse. Because until you get ahead of it, you have to close those loopholes before people abuse them, because as you've seen in these scenarios, people will abuse them. Yeah. Absolutely, they will abuse them.
And this is why every team has to have substitute players on their rosters. Like, it really is just that simple. And if you don't have the proper substitute player, like, for example, when we saw with EG, they didn't have the substitute AD carry. They had like one of their coaches in. You're shit out of luck, man. That's just how things roll.
They had 2 jungle players. 2.
So you have to have substitute players. What is the point of substitute players if you can just sign one of the greatest players who happens to be sitting on the bench, or is sitting, not even on the bench, just literally a free agent for the rest of the playoffs, which also, by the way, might directly qualify you for Worlds. Because, yeah, Fnatic has at least earned the right to play Golden Guardians, but they can just directly qualify for the World Championship right now, which is a huge bonus. And Wonder probably will play pretty well in these matches, you would have to assume, considering that he's not going to have nerves in this situation. And Dom said he's been at least actively playing. So I don't know, man. I don't understand what the fucking rules are if you can just bend them to your will. And like, yeah, it just sucks. Like, get wrecked, Fnatic.
All I'm going to say
injuries happen.
I would never personally, because I'm a moral person, I would never abuse loopholes like this and lie and be disingenuous to get an advantage. But if, for example, you were a team that rhymes with GDS, let's say that Shio's just having a really bad time mentally with how the year's gone. There's a guy called Inspired. He could just, if you nip him,
rock up.
I think that world should be pretty nice, right? Pop him in the lineup. Just saying, it's available. He is on the table.
Yeah,
why not?
This shit's really crazy, I think. And what's crazier to me is that nobody seems to care about it from the fan base perspective. Everybody just kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, well, I guess it's just cool that in the most important matches of the year that Fnatic can just sign a new player after rosters have been locked. The whole thing's outrageous. Like, well, Fnatic, that sucks. Sometimes things just don't go your way. And I guess you just have to roll with whatever substitute player you actually legitimately have on your roster. I'm trying to figure out who their substitute player even is right now. I guess Reckless?
I mean, I guess he's probably still under contract, theoretically, right?
Yeah. I think he's still under contract. I think Reckless might actually be their sub.
I'm also willing to accept that possibility. Just have Reckless play top lane. And listen, I accept that. Whatever happens to the outcome, if they win the league, if they win Worlds, it'll be the egg on my face. But I think he should play top lane. I think that's the move for me.
Well, I'm trying to figure out who is on there. I'm looking at the contract database.
He already has that Kennen pocket pick. So we start, that is one right there. There's one. We've got one for you. He does technically play Garen. If you remember, they played Yumi Garen that one game. There's 2. He's got 2 picks already so far. I'm liking it. Bring Reckless back. I say bring Reckless back.
Yeah, he's still on the roster, technically. He's still in the global contract database. He is listed there. So I guess he's their official substitute player.
And to be fair, a lot of top laners are scared to push too far up the lane and constantly just look for a nice reset. So he's in many ways already a top laner. Just a subtle point if you understand how we used to catch the side lane waves,
All right. Any other little topics you want to hit up this week before we do viewer questions?
Is there anything we've missed? I think we got most of them.
Yep. Worth noting that Summoning Insight will be live on Sunday after LEC this coming week because I am moving. So we can't do it at the normal time, but we will get an episode out to you. It'll just be a few days earlier. So you guys can look forward to that. We'll take a quick break and come back with viewer questions.
Right, we're back for the viewer questions segment. The viewer questions themselves are sourced not by live viewers, but by people who are viewers of ours who are on our Discord and subscribe to us. So go to the Last Free Nation Discord and subscribe there if you want to do so. Monty will now ask some of the interesting questions from that list. But we're going to cap this one. It won't be as long as the other ones just because we haven't got unlimited time for this one today.
Yeah, so basically, guys, first off, we have a couple weeks because we didn't do one last week of you guys submitting questions. And secondly, I am literally in the process of moving my entire house right now, so I have to go do that. So I'm sorry, this will be a little bit shorter than normal. If you want your question answered, just keep asking it in the new channel next week. The cost of LCS teams providing their players housing must be magnitudes larger than minimum California wage. In other contractual work, you get paid and you sort out your own living situation. Why has esports gone so far as to pay for the players' rent as well? Is it a leftover from the time of gaming houses? If the LCS does move to a cheaper location, would it not be the first thing to get cut costs, or would it stay? So a lot of the reason is it's hard to ask players to sign long-term leases when they don't have stability in terms of their own contracts, right? So like it's pretty shitty, in my opinion, to like bring a player on, and then if you cut them, they're on the hook for this year lease and they don't have a guaranteed income from the team anymore. It is somewhat residual from the gaming houses, but gaming houses were very efficient because you could get large houses. Like the cost of housing people in a gaming house was a lot less than getting them all individual apartments. And also, especially because you wanted, I think, more oversight when the scene was newer and players on average were a lot younger, just so you would have oversight over the team. But yeah, I think that it has become a perk that players have become used to. Now, did it need to exist that we had to pay for players' apartments when they were making 7 figures? Probably not. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. So maybe it is a little bit of a holdout. What do you think?
To me, there's two things. One is when, like, the era you're talking about, when everyone was in a team house, is when, like, you have to understand that's not actually a positive that someone pays for you to live there. That's like you actually live in a content factory where you have to work all day long. Like when we say like we're providing their accommodation, when you're in a team house like that, it even allowed coaches to have access to you like 15 hours a day. Like I actually think that was even like egregious in terms of how much like interaction you had with people who were essentially your colleagues at work. Like a lot of people, in my opinion, the reason they burned out in that era is because they never felt like they had a moment to themselves, or that they were away from work, or that you weren't in some context in the bubble of your job. And then the other thing is, when you're talking about the angle of like, why is this a problem? One of the biggest issues people are going to continuously have, and I don't blame you because I didn't know about business at all a few years ago, is you have to understand how negotiations work. The people who pay and offer the most in the market set the value. It doesn't matter that you sit down and go, but no player should be paid $4 million to play league. What matters is, did someone offer him $4 million? And if he hadn't have taken that offer, was the next offer $3.8 million? Because if that's the case, then spoiler, it doesn't matter what you think he's worth. Someone guaranteed is going to be paying more than $3 million in this example. So one of the other problems is it became a standard perk, as Monty says, because every team was offering you will pay your accommodation as well. Now, no one else, unfortunately, has the innovation to say, well, actually, I want to structure my differently. I want more cash, but then I want to sort out my accommodation. No, everyone just goes, right, yes, then I want the accommodation plus the high salary plus whatever else you get. So it just became a standard thing you gave them, basically.
I think it also, there's no way to put this kindly. Pro players oftentimes are not highly functioning human beings in the real world. And if you're a team, do you really want some kind of crisis with your player where they are struggling to figure out their own living situation when you can just deal with that for them and take it off their mind and have them focus on playing the game? Sometimes it's just better to be in control of that situation rather than your player fucking it up and then getting distracted from the game. That is a fair
I will say though, this is one of the reasons why you guys think you've been too harsh to pro play. No, there are people. This is why I roasted the fuck out of them during that walkout. There are people who are millionaires right now, this year and for the past years, who have been making millions of dollars while never having even the basic life expenses that everyone else in the world has. So like a guy who makes a job where he makes 60K a year has to pay for his fucking accommodations, transport to work, food. This guy makes millions, gets all of that for free, and then turns around and goes, "Hey, Moist, Critical, and Ludwig, can you talk about how exploited I am as a worker in the capitalist system?" And then they're actually telling this cocksucker, like, yeah, this is what happens at the end of late stage capitalism. Nightmare scenarios like you, a young child who's dog shit at a video game, getting paid millions of dollars to play it. I hope we get to my dream of communism where you would have a much better life. Like, that's why I hate pro players on some level. I don't like if we're in a call and we just talk about the game. I love them; they're great personalities. But there are certain areas where, yes, they do have like the functionality of a fucking 13-year-old child who isn't on the honor roll.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Hassan's new take, the socialist who makes millions of dollars and lives in West Hollywood.
By the way, a little random detail, you might enjoy this. You know, good old Hassan, the virtuous Hassan. So, because he is one of those left-wing people who thinks it's like morally fine for sex work to exist. I don't know about you, but in any moral framework I'm aware of in human history, one of the worst things that can happen to women is to sell their bodies for sex and money just to live. That's actually considered like a sort of marker that society's at a terrible spot when that's what a woman has to turn to. We're not talking about people who choose to do it for millions, just has to turn to that. This is brilliant. Because of that, he thought it was fun on a stream once to brag that when he was in, I think, like Germany or something, he went to some brothel. It was later revealed in a story that brothel used trafficked underage women in the brothel. That's the virtuous character you're letting tell everyone. And by the way, I'll just throw this out there. Anyone watching this broadcast right now who's in the industry of esports, if you ever support, retweet, or in any way promote Hassan's content, and you're someone who had the goal to call out Carlos, you need to look in a mirror, mate. You need to go and look in a mirror right now. Because I thought it was all about trafficking with you guys. I thought you were all against that. Like, you wouldn't ever take anyone who actually himself fucking uses that shit. Like, give me a break. So, no, wild, these people are all morons, mate. Sadly, this is why, like, that shit is a LARP. Like, they just do it as, to them, that's just their sort of, like, theme, if you know what I mean. I don't think, like here's the real problem with topics like that. Do you think Hassan Piker is actually sat down reading Das Kapital? I bet he just. I bet he read like the fucking, those ones where it's like Cliff the Penguin primer work, exactly like the one where it's just like, it's got a big picture of Karl Marx's head on the front. It's like, get the quick 101 on it. Like he's just doing that shit, isn't he, mate? It's just like another. He may as well be like a variety streamer. That's just his grift. Is some weird politics streamers or whatever. It's whatever on that one.
Yikes. Hollywood has discovered LFM culture and have asked the 4Play team to put together a Barbenheimer-esque double esports feature. You are to combine 2 single-day events from esports history into one weekend bonanza. The first day is serious, long, with a stacked talent lineup and will forever be remembered for its explosiveness. The second day will be fun, silly, woke, will divide the masses, and is unlikely to be particularly memorable. What do you pitch to Hollywood? So which 2 esports events would be slammed together in one weekend, one of which is serious and one of which is like fun, silly, and ridiculous? I think you got to take that Heroes of New Earth thing that we did for the fun and silly one, the Heroes of New Earth final that we did in our esports cringe. I think that is the peak of esports cringe content. So you have to take that purely because the wonderful thing about esports is that it is both hilariously awkward and cringe and can be serious at the same time. And that's what I love about it, is those 2 poles interacting with each other. So I would take that. And then as for what's the most serious, like epic match that you would take?
I mean, you could take like whatever, something from like TI or something. Like if everyone remembers, like for me, one of the best ones was that one where Na'Vi played Alliance in the TI final. That was a banger.
There you go.
TI4, I think. You
briefly alluded to Westerns in your last 4Play episode. Have either of you ever watched Once Upon a Time in the West? Oh, that was a long time ago. Yes.
The problem with that, though, is he means the Enrique Morricone one, right?
Yeah, the one from the 60s. Yes, it's been a long time though, so I don't know if I have any recent thoughts about that one.
I mean, I'm just not a big fan of spaghetti westerns anyway, so whatever.
Right. What would it take for Faker to lose his GOAT status? When you break down those three world...
Nothing. I've tested it, nothing. The answer's nothing. He can objectively, with his eye test, not play anywhere close to that for absolutely 5 or 6 years, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As far as I can tell, I can tell you the answer. Here's the answer. Someone has to, literally, at one point with the eye test, look like the best, and then also just win more rings than him. That's it. That's it. I mean, I've learned with the Brady thing, Monty, it's a waste of time. As soon as someone buys into the notion Brady is the GOAT, nothing can ever prove he isn't. There's no arguments against it. So I don't think there is an answer, right? What could you even envision someone who can overtake it in the minds of the fans? Surely they'd have to have all the world's titles, right?
The thing about Faker is that at least even in the nephew fans, they've kind of they never watched even when he was good, like really good. So now he's just being hyped up by the nephews, which is weird because they weren't even around or bothered to watch the games that made him famous in the first place. And the T1 fan base is so outrageous.
See, let me test your ability to empathize and relate to a pleb, right? When I say the opinion I have, which is considered controversial, that I think actually Rookie is the GOAT of League of Legends, because I only care about how your body of work was, what your play was. I don't care about championships, mate. Championships are won by GMs, teams in general. They're not individual players. Don't win championships. I'll tell you right now. So when I say Rookie is the GOAT of League of Legends, what do you think the number one it's not ring title. What do you think the number one reason as to why he can't be the GOAT is? What do you think they say to me?
He hasn't been to Worlds. Hasn't gone to a lot of Worlds.
Literally, their logic goes, he didn't make it to Worlds all these years, so he can't be. So by their logic, in the LPL, easily the most talent stacked division ever in League of Legends for about 5 years now, by the way, because he doesn't just come top 4, he can't be the best.
Yeah. Yep. I also
have with someone like that, mate. Like I can't have a debate with someone like that.
It's also the lack of just international competition in general, because I think over the last 5 years, the debate about Faker versus Rookie would be very different if we got to see that matchup, but we never get to see that matchup. So,
I mean, here's one for you. Have them have the same careers, but just make it so that like MSI has the format it had this year for all of history. Dude, wouldn't that be so much more like sample size, opportunity to see match? It would be awesome, wouldn't it? Like we'd have a totally different perspective on who the best players were.
All right. Thoughts on the TI format changes? They seem atrocious to me. TI has always had one of, if not the best format of any esports tournament. Why mess with a good thing? Really disappointed with how Valve has been treating Dota lately. So the TLDR and the changes are 2 groups of 10 to 5 groups of 4. So same number. Well, I guess, fewer teams actually. Oh no, same number of teams. So still
4 groups of 5. It's either way around.
4 groups of 5. Okay. Teams play way fewer.
I'm looking it up now.
Now, teams play way fewer games before being eliminated and moving to bracket stage. So I think one of the things that was hard logistically for TI, as well, the format was good. You had to have like lots of simultaneous streams going on, and the days were super long. So it may just be something that they're trying to cut in terms of budget or time. Because they don't want to do more days of the tournament if they want to do fewer broadcast hours per day. It was pretty crazy to try and follow that, though, with the number of simultaneous games that were happening and the length of time they were on air every day. So I have some level of sympathy.
You just don't watch all the games. It's a sport. You don't watch. You just watch the games you care about. You get my point.
Yeah.
Spoiler, I didn't try to follow all those games. I just watched the teams I care about. It's great.
Bummer. I guess it's a bummer, but I don't know if there's more to the changes than that. I don't know if I really have an opinion, but about this format. But the old format was really robust, and I really enjoyed it.
I mean, if people don't know, like the old format is basically what IPL 5 is. That's why everyone loved IPL 5 when it happened. So yes, I thought it was a better format. Like I also did like the group stage angle, especially because it was only like the fucking there was only something like 2 teams got eliminated in the group stage. So even if you finished like second or last, you could still make some crazy bracket run. So I don't think it's the end of the world, though. It's still group stage play into TI. So it's whatever, into the bracket. Like, I'm trying to see if there's any like bigger fundamental change that they haven't talked about. I think it's just that more teams go out in the group stage, Monty. I think that's what is the issue. But it still looks fairly robust to me. Like you have like a bunch of playoff games, like a phase of other matches of people who are lower down, and then you have still like a pretty good bracket. I think it's still a good format. It's still way better than Worlds. So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
or the CS majors.
Easy.
With the gameplay we've seen throughout this entire year for C9 and the LCS, what changes do you two in particular think that is realistic and or something you personally would like to see? As a consensus, you have to replace mid lane, top, and support. Fudge's underperformance the entire year.
We're revamping C9's roster, basically.
Yeah.
You do.
I think the
only ones are keeping, right?
Yeah, you definitely keep those guys, by the way. I don't see a world where it's feasible to upgrade off of those positions. So I would say for me, obviously the play you make is trying to get JoJo for mid lane. If you can swing that at all, that would probably be pretty huge for you. I'm not sure
we've got an import slot, remember? We've got one import slot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you could always import a top laner. I'm not sure if there's a domestic support player that you'd rather be having right now. Maybe you can get Vulcan back. But because the problem with Vulcan is that Vulcan and Sven didn't like playing together. And so if Sven is no longer on the roster, he's playing with Berserker instead, maybe you could take that route. But if I'm FlyQuest, I don't think I'm giving up Vulcan. I think he's too valuable as a resident player for roster construction reasons. So he's one of the players I think the
JoJo Call's a good one. JoJo Call's not a bad one because it's a domestic player as well. So it keeps us we can use the import slot for a different position. If I had to say, to me, it's just obvious that if you have import, you probably use it for top lane. I think top lane's so bad in the West right now. I mean, there's so many good Koreans can play that role. And then also, if you're going for the support one, dude, you don't even have to go crazy on that one. I think someone like Hui could be good. He's a good player. What's wrong with him?
Yeah. He's been good this year.
Seems like a vet to me.
On a scale of F to S tier, rate the following esports professions in terms of pay and overall job satisfaction. Okay, F to S tier. Pro player. S tier in terms of pay.
S plus.
You get more money than you should ever receive.
Yeah.
And also, at least in NA, your job's easy. I mean, the job is hard. So, and job satisfaction, I mean, people love to compete.
If we're talking about League of Legends, by the way, technically you get more job satisfaction they deserve in League of Legends, because in League of Legends in NA now, you could be on the 4th best team and go to the World Championship while Rookie watches on stream wish that was me. That's your life. The fuck? Mate, come in and see CSGO and see what it's like. You're not doing that shit. You might rock up as the one last team. Okay, what after pro player?
Coach, analyst / scout.
Coach is going to be F for this, for pay and for satisfaction, because even if you win, you get no credit. Dude, people unironically, the worst examples ever are the European coaches, mate. People tell young buck and grabs that they know nothing about League of Legends.
Yep.
I can't even process that, mate. That's how you know these are all 14-year-olds that never had a job. You can't be bad at your job and get the results they had, guys. It's impossible. They have to at least be sort of good / competent at a minimum. Yep. If not, maybe they were even the best. You know what I mean? So I think coach is pretty low, because all the coaches I know by the way, first of all, you get paid way less. And then secondly, you get all the blame and none of the credit. So that's got to be F tier for that, surely.
Journalist. But that's got to be
in
F.
The middle.
Really?
Well, the real problem is this, right? It is a job where it depends whether we're talking about the upper end of it or the average journalist. Because if you're the average journalist in esports, Monty, here's where you will get satisfaction. Oh, you are an absolute nobody who's not even doing much in this world now, but you could be semi-famous off that. You can have people know your shitty Pokemon avatar, and you can get to have a vote for who wins the MVP of the LCS. You can get a bunch of wow, I can't believe this is happening to me. Now, I will say the pay is terrible. That's obviously dog shit. And if you were actually a real journalist, it's the least satisfying job, because you can be Richard Lewis and say 99.99% of things that happened, and the only responses go, who cares? Didn't we all know that already, based on a rumor they heard from a Pokemon? Or they just go, yeah, but what about the 0.000000001% time you weren't totally right, Richard? Aren't you a corrupt piece of shit? So actually job satisfaction, very low for that. Probably very low for that.
Yeah, the recognition you get, and also people are just shitty to you because
trying to hit on you all day long, aren't they?
You report on something about their team that they don't like, and then they just go ballistic on you.
They kill the messenger every time, basically. Yeah. They kill the messenger every time. It's I'm trying to think who this was. Fuck, this even happened recently in esports, mate. I can't remember I'm blanking on the scenario. Maybe someone will know what I'm talking about. Basically, someone just reported some actual news that was like news that you wouldn't want to hear, and everyone was just hating on the guy who did it. And it's like, but he's just he didn't make the news happen though. He's just reporting the news, and they were all hating on him like, "You piece of shit! How dare you?" It was like, he didn't do it, did he? He's just telling you what happened. But that is a real human response, Sadie, that people will give you. Is there another category? Is like ordering?
Oh, there's a lot more. There's a lot. So interview/translator. That's pretty good.
It's probably pretty good in both regards. Actually, I think the pay is not terrible for that, and obviously,
yeah,
you actually get a B in the interview.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I say that's like a B.
Not bad. Yeah.
Broadcast talent. That's like a C.
That's fairly high up.
You really? Maybe B?
The problem again is we're talking equivalent to what? Like you might think they make nothing, mate, but to me, I'm kind of a bit more harsh. I look at some of these dickheads who do LCS, and I'm like, you get paid 90K to be some shitter on that. Like that's not bad, mate. Like, and look, I don't respect you, but that's not a bad gig. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing is that you can get paid okay. I would say on like the lower end of okay a lot of the time, but you have no upward mobility. You have nothing that you can ever translate this into. And as we saw with Dash, you can get paid well one day and then get paid $0 the next day, and that's it. That's the end. So it's mostly because of the monopolies that exist in the space that being a broadcast talent is pretty unstable, and you are not in control of your own life or career whatsoever, which is pretty lame. And there's no way to gain control because you can't go anywhere else. It sucks a lot.
I just too many mean jokes run through my head. Basically, what I'll do is I'll mask who it is, so then there'll be no problem. Basically, that's the problem. Again, it's all about the context of where you come from. Like, put it this way: some of these guys, if they weren't making the 90K, what would they even have to look forward to, Monty? The monthly barn raising. I was very subtle. I slid that one under there. Just see, you can figure it out. You do the work. You do the legwork, guys. You do the legwork.
Physician, esports doctor. That's probably like S, because you do nothing and you make a lot of money because you're a doctor.
The problem is, then you get wrecked by me in a video. Shout out, Game Dog.
Psychiatrist / mental health coach. That's also S plus, because you get paid a fuck ton by people to do, as far as I can tell, very little.
The best part is if you work with a team who used to lose, and apropos of nothing you did, let's say a player just himself overcomes it or plays great next time. If they win, people say you did it all, and that you like transformed their mind and you were like the panacea. Like, yeah, that's going to be an S tier plus for that one. Come on. Easy.
Commissioner. That is a great job, because at least in esports, the commissioners don't even have to deal with the downsides because they never talk publicly, take responsibility for their actions. Who even is the commissioner of the LCK? Never taking any responsibility. So that's like an S tier job, because nobody expects you to actually be the commissioner. You're not even doing your job, so the downsides don't exist. It's pretty sweet. Tournament organizer. It's probably like a solid B tier right now.
I'll say the one thing that probably would shock people on that one is, unless you're the absolute top guys, the pay is way worse to work for TOs than people probably realize. That's why actual commentators don't do it anymore, because unless you're like actually the guy who runs ESL or something, you're not going to be on a big salary. You're not going to be on commentator money, put it that way.
Sure.
I feel like this job satisfaction is fairly good, though. You do get to put on essentially what is the real lifeblood of esports, which is huge events. Those are the things people remember.
Yeah, it's fun and it's satisfying for sure. Producer. Well, considering that they have to compete with producers for, actual shit in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, that's pretty good, because you get to work on a cool product and you get paid well. The producers get paid well, too well in a lot of cases, in my opinions, for their general level of quality. But the job of producer, the reason why they get paid well is because they can go do other things. They can produce other live television. They can produce other movies or shows. They have the skill set, so they have to pay them properly. So that's pretty good. I would say that's like A tier. You're not going to get paid as much as you would at doing other production stuff, but the job satisfaction is probably pretty good. Player agent. Well, that's probably not going to be great now. I wouldn't want to manage professional players, but you may have made a lot of money in the past.
Problem is, a couple of years ago, that was like a sweet spot job, though. You were definitely getting mad more money than people realize, because some of them making like the percentage of the deal, and some of them were just running game on everyone. So once upon a time, it was a good grift.
Lawyer. Well, lawyers get paid a certain amount, so that's a great job, honestly. You can always go practice law. A lot of this is going to be contract law, which is applicable across entertainment or many other aspects of the industry, corporate law. So this is pretty good gig, I would say. It's probably like an A to S tier. General manager. I think that just depends on the team you're on, because you could have a lot of control or you could have almost zero control depending on the team. So job satisfaction, I think, purely rests in how much power is invested in you to make decisions within the org.
I think we skip the rest. Go to another question. This lasted too long.
All right. Throughout all of human history, there have been many individuals who are either A, spurred to discipline and fulfilled their own greatness as a result of encountering observable, motivating moments and circumstances. So basically exterior motivation, I guess, and B, had seemingly insane natural discipline that created miracles regardless of a specific event. Which do you think is more common? So are individuals, either spurred to greatness by an exterior force providing motivation, or internal motivation resulting in, and discipline resulting in, a great feat?
I mean, it's essentially like a classic philosophical question, which goes, are great men made, or are they born that way, essentially? So the problem with it is, in terms of normal people, just the average humans, I would say most of them require external motivation or things to spur them forwards, or like in the wolf at the door. I actually do think, though, if we're talking only about like the greatest men ever, they all do seem to have some internal like generating force, some vital potency that makes them just like, if people don't know that. There wasn't like, it's not like the rent was due, so Alexander the Great conquered the world. Like, he had some crazy vision of conquering the world, so I think, to me, I'd probably say the latter.
And the thing about being, achieving greatness. So let's talk about Alexander, right? He had all the setup for success based on his father, Philip, who was, a very ambitious and successful king and military commander in his own right. But many people would have just sat on their laurels and gotten fat off of the inheritance that they were given. And he was like,
I mean, the joke is most people,
what if I just conquered everything?
Do that thing where it's like they can become a millionaire because they had billions of someone else's money, if you get the joke. Like, that's it, the joke, what usually the next generation is like in it, yeah.
So I will say that, there was obviously something in Alexander's case that caused him to want to do really crazy things, such as, instead of, I don't know, enjoying everything that was in his life, going on insane marches all the way to India, never taking any break, and continuing to conquer the entire Persian Empire, which was vastly larger than his own. So there was something clearly crazily internally motivated about that, because he could have lived an extremely good life based on the kingdom that he inherited. Right.
Plus, there's that like story where they claim that like his mother told him that actually his father wasn't Philip, it was like Zeus himself or something.
An oracle told him that in Egypt, but yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Which in this era is sort of like, that's like the sign of like, just go ham, basically. So like at that point, you think you are God's gift to the world, aren't you?
He may have, Thorin, by the way, made some insinuations to the oracle that was the case, and then paid them a lot of money, and then that prediction came out of the oracle's mouth. So maybe he was the genesis of that in reality. I love the Thorin video going through the history of peripherals pros used in different eras. Is there any intention of doing more of those? Only a few years ago, pros were holding on to outdated tech, but I feel like recently there's been more of an openness to the new stuff as it's improved, like most people using wireless now, since it isn't unreliable like it was before. That's true. I mean, the Logitech wireless technology and the low latency has changed what a lot of players use in terms of peripherals, right?
The only problem with that is, though, it just almost disappoints me how limited, like the sheer paucity of imagination in esports. Because if you're like going to use wireless mice, then I'm not going to put an extra 1,000 hours into mid lane. I'm just going to get the tech that I have a device that I point towards your mouse and it turns your mouse off or fucks it up or doubles your sensitivity. How are you ever going to catch me? There's not even a detection system. Spoiler, there's the Mission Impossible movie that one, no one would watch, but B would be amazing. So Mission Impossible, rogue mouse thing, I don't know, whatever.
During Game 3 of the LCK Finals, it felt like the replays were really harming the flow of the game. This is a classic LCK thing, by the way. It would come out of a replay and a play is already underway. Do you think LoL or CS overuse replays? I think LCK overuses replays. LCK has a massive replay boner of showing really stupid shit again and then missing the flow of the game. So even though the observing is good, I think sometimes the producers like call for replays of very simple plays that happen, and that has been a problem. So I think 100% LCK overuses replays. I don't think it's as bad in other regions. I think it's the Korean broadcast.
Here's the thing.
Egregious.
Replay is not an issue at all in CS because you have the time between the rounds. The biggest issue in Counter-Strike to this day is every TO permanently, instantly, the second they think the round is over, just goes to a crowd shot or a player shot. And the worst thing now is it's actually gotten so bad in CSGO now that they do it and they fuck up diffusers, mate. Like diffusers have happened that they weren't showing on screen because some producer just thought, oh, the round is over, and then just went to like a camera shot of the crowd. Which is wild. It's even after the major, mate. It's wild. So it's not replays, it's other things that are the problem in CS. Because in CSGO, half the problem the TOs have is they can't stop wanking off over the fact they have a crowd. Like it's like they think it's surreal that the event's happening. They can't stop going on about it. Even though to me, that's actually such low rent behavior, Monty. Because what you're actually showing there, I'll give you the example. You probably saw it on Twitter. You know how everyone couldn't shut the fuck up about how Ben Affleck was at the Valorant like VCT thing. When you do that, what you're actually communicating is, I really did think we're all just a bunch of loser nerds, and nobody in the world who has any relevance would ever care about us, because how could they? We're all loser nerds. Here's the thing. I've met people like that, guys. When I meet them, I just go like, oh, hi, Ben. If they introduce themselves, like, you just treat them like a normal human, for fuck's sake.
Yep.
Act like you've been there before. Act like you're supposed to be there, you know?
Exactly. Don't ask for selfies. During Game 3 of... on a scale of 1 to 10, how does the KT failure rate and why? Do they beat Gen G if they actually...
This one's
pretty far up there, guys. It's like...
Because I thought they should have just won the split, mate. This one's pretty bad to come third.
They were first place in the split. They beat Gen G towards the end. We talked about this on our fraud alert segment on Power Spike, where we rated it like an 8 or 9 out of 10 out of fraud. I mean, the fact that they lost to T1 twice is just terrible.
And especially the way they drafted and all those. Yeah,
the way they played the game. It was shit, man. When LoL eventually dies, do you see another MOBA replacing it, or does it have to be another genre? I've talked about this before, but the history of esports is the history of technology making new genres possible, right? Like MOBA wasn't an esport because when everybody's internet connection was super unreliable, if you had one person disconnect from a game of Dota, the game was fucking ruined. And that's why most people were playing like 1v1 games, where if somebody disconnects, you either win or you lose, and you're on to the next game. You're not just like trapped in some sort of insane purgatory. You know, we didn't have battle royale games because the technology didn't exist to get 100 people in a server at one time. So we never know what the next genre of esport is going to be, because likely it's going to be enabled by technology that doesn't exist yet.
The next genre of esports will be a totally global, millions of people at the same time game of Bomberman, where it's a giant map and you're all playing at the same time in one map. That's the future right there. That's the future. Basically, it's what I just wish was real, but not. By the way, shout out the old school Bomberman games. So those were the shit. Those were the shit.
Tomorrow, I moved to Seoul to study economics abroad for the upcoming semester. As I have personally never visited South Korea before, I would love to know if you have any recommendations when it comes to museums that I should try to visit, or any day-long hiking trips. I would go. So first off, you should go to the Korean War Museum. That is super cool. Also, was the site where they held the championship in season 2, where CLG EU almost won a title in Korea. So you can think about that while you're there. But very good museum. You can go to places like Gyeongbokgung, which is like the old palace. They have a very interesting audio tour there. There's tons of hikes even within Seoul. So you can hike up to Namsan, the tower, with the tower at the top, because they didn't develop the mountains in Seoul. So all of them are basically parks. If you want a more spectacular national park, you can go take a bus from Seoul out to Soraksan, which is on the east coast, and that is a national park with these big granite mountains. That's very fun to hike around in. I've been out there. Lots of stuff to do.
By the way, the most classic museum-y type thing is obviously just to go to like the Hanok village where you just get to basically see like a recreation of what the older, because that's like quite interactive. It's actually quite a fun day out as well.
Yeah, and you can dress up in hanboks, which is the traditional Korean clothing, and take pictures for the gram. The two of you are making a new talk show about general esports and focusing on entertainment. The two of you are producing it and do not get to be on the talk show. What esports talent do you pick to be on it? So general esports topics.
Okay, general. Okay, so we're picking people who sort of like
know about esports.
Jack of all trades. They can just talk about anything pretty much. I'll tell you one I would pick immediately, which would probably be out of left field for some people, would actually be Sideshow, the guy from Overwatch and Valorant. Like, to me, like, this will sound weird, but you can go look this up if you want. Actually, I'll give him a shout out on this particular episode. Go look up a video he did of his thoughts on the whole Carlos G2 thing. Because, by the way, he's against all Andrew Tate and all that angle, so he's not biased in that regard. But I thought he had one of the most level-headed takes on the whole thing. Basically, the summation was this, Monty, and he's the first person I saw make this observation. He just basically came to the conclusion, if you look at how they treated Carlos, esports in general, and how they obviously clearly wouldn't treat other people in certain precedents, essentially what they did was, because they themselves have no actual access to Andrew Tate, they just punished Carlos as if he was Andrew Tate. Essentially, I thought, what a fucking amazing observation that is from a guy who actually has a natural bias against the individual we're talking about in this case. So he's someone I can tell you, I haven't seen him in Overwatch and seen him in Valorant, a very different game. This guy could talk about anything. He's just a really smart guy with a really
He's a smart guy,
mind.
And he's also a great entertainer. Great entertainer.
Oh, it's really funny as well, yeah.
Yeah, his content is excellent.
He'd easily be on this list. Yeah, there you go.
I would say Uber would be another one from Overwatch League, like knows a lot about the esports scene in general, is very articulate, does get like passionately worked up and angry. You can see the 4 Horsemen episodes that he's been on, and his content I think is also really good. And I know he has a good kind of read, and he's not afraid either. I mean, he's talked pretty negatively about Blizzard in the past, even while continuing to do Overwatch League, because he's very passionate about it and has, I think, solid ethics around the scene. Obviously, Richard would be another one, but I assume Richard is not in the. I would assume we're not talking about Richard.
The joke is, unless you're doing some like pure analytical show, there's almost no show would it be made better by adding Richard as one of the people in the mix. You know.
Yeah, it's hard though because
a random one. I'll because this will just be a fun one. If you just want someone amiable to round the group, maybe like Anders Bloom, because the thing about Anders is he always has a very unique like perspective on everything.
And honestly, Shocks is probably another one because she.
I can't afford her, mate. The is too high. I thought we were keeping it reasonable. You know?
Well, she works in so many different esports that she brings a variety of perspectives in. And I think she would be very good at moderating some of these discussions. It's hard because most talent in esports only work in like one game and like literally have no idea what is happening in the broader industry. It's honestly shocking to me how many people I talk to who just don't give a shit about what is happening in the broader industry, have no knowledge about money, the state of different scenes. They just don't care. They're myopically focused on their one esport, and that is it. All right, one last question, guys, then I have to go pack. Follow up on last week's mythology question. Choose a pantheon and make a god representing you in it. What do you mean? What is your appearance? What special items do you have? What values you represent? And what is your presumed... Okay, no, we're not going to do the pantheon. Like, choose a pantheon. I don't know. What would you be the god of, Thorin?
I mean, I like always to make it funny. So I would probably be something like unduly complicated petty revenge.
I think we're both on the retribution side of things.
Yeah,
I mean, I named myself MonteCristo.
Yeah.
I would love to be a god of retribution. Where you get your karmic comeuppance. You get your karmic comeuppance. And the tools that I hold are whatever tools you use. So I only appear wielding the weapons of my opponents, right? So I use their own tools against them. There you go.
I mean, I would have something similar. I would use, obviously, my weapons would be weapons of distraction. It would be mirrors. And I would essentially use the things you've done and said against you. It would be like a mirror in one hand and like a simplistic recording device in another, you know, maybe like a conch shell that just echoes so much too I can still hear it later. And so I can replay what you said to me in antiquity now, and then also show you, like, instead of a tweet, like, this is what you looked like when you fucked there or whatever, you know.
I think your mirror should show their own thoughts the truth of their own thoughts. They can't escape it, right?
As a final way to destroy you completely, I have a third device, which is also a mirror. And the way this destroys you is at the end, I just show you the man you could have been if you'd have been better.
I was about to say that. That's great.
That's the way I completely destroy you at the end. Your soul is just burned up exactly.
That's fire. I love it. Okay. Thanks, guys. Sorry, there are a lot more questions.
We're not going to next time. It's all good. We're going on Sunday anyway. It's coming up on Sunday.
Please re-ask your questions, and we'll try and get there. My packing extravaganza is not going to be done by Sunday, so I am warning you. On Sunday, it will also be a shorter question segment. Although maybe if my packing is done by Sunday, it might not be, but we'll hope that's the case. If we can do a long packing or a long question segment, that will mean Monte is in a good place in packing up everything he owns.
Exactly. Basically, if the episode at the viewer question starts like a fucking House of Pain song, like pack it up, pack it in, let me pick it, then you'll know it's fire. Then we're ready to go. It's all good.
Very good. All right, guys. Sorry about the shorter questions this week. We'll see you again on Sunday for our episode, and then we'll be back on a normal schedule after that. See you then.